The following presentation of the Eric McKenna Project is sponsored by no one.
Hello, you're listening to the Eric McKenna Project.
All right, so here we go. Friends, thanks for doing this, as usual. We're back. This is a 5-person show.
Thank you for having us.
Uno, dos, tres, cuatro. Right? That's good.
My.
5.
You're pulling out the glasses for this.
He's got his reading glasses on. James, thank you once again for doing this.
No problem. Your new studio is amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we're kind of trying to figure this out. I still got some lights I haven't turned on yet, so
Okay.
a little behind the 8 ball. But
Oh, you said you still have some lace.
Lace. I gave that up years ago. So thanks again for doing this unique show. Fred would love to be here, but Fred is still out on the road. So like I said, every time Fred gives you a schedule, you just know it's not quite as it seems. But I will announce on here that Fred is going to be Nikki Sixx's bass tech.
Yay,
Incredible.
Fred.
Yeah,
Awesome.
he got his dream gig.
Yeah, Fred.
Yeah.
But he is going to be back for a 2 or 3 week period, so we're all going to try to reconvene at some point. I know your schedule's tough, but we'll talk about that.
Okay, we make that work.
We got to do
Fred.
it. We got to do a 6-person show.
That'd be amazing.
I just want to run my fingers through it.
Yeah, that hair.
Okay. So tonight we're talking
I
about
don't think he
a money conspiracy.
I'm nervous about this. 'cause
Why?
All we've done so far are like UFO alien shows. This is
Well, one thing I do is we have to get you closer to that mic. Yeah.
Okay, I can do that.
Yeah. Can you turn it toward you, Jane? Like, can you tilt? Yeah, there you go. Now
Okay.
we're cooking on a front burner. There
Okay,
you go.
got it. Okay.
All right, we're good.
Okay.
We're good.
All right.
So,
Let's
I'm
get
giving
going.
you the floor.
Okay, let's do this. Want to start off with the real showstopper right off the bat. Money, as we know it, is not real. It used to be real at one point. Money is now pretend. So what I want to talk about is how money started. We're going to see it actually derived fairly organically, but then along the road, everything about money got messed up, and that could lead us to some pretty major disasters today. So I hope you all really enjoy this. Feel free to chime in whenever you want to.
Oh, we will.
Okay, good.
Yeah, plus our money's debt. If it's real, it's just a negative number.
Kind of, because it's funny money now, it seems like, right?
It is.
I mean, before we even start, would you not agree that generally the public just thinks they hear billions? And billions is now what millions used to be 30 years
yes,
ago.
it is.
Yeah.
It absolutely
And
is.
trillions is going to be eventually what billions is now,
Yes.
right?
It's almost like Congress years ago, if they passed something in the billions, you took note. You're like, whoa, billions. And now that's all gone by the wayside. Now it's all trillions.
And
all of it.
a million's chump change.
Oh, my gosh.
1 million is
absolutely.
like nothing.
Yeah. And I think there's a
I
reason
mean,
for
Jerry's
that.
got 6 or 7 of those in his basement.
million.
I was about to say it's all going to be Dr. Evil because it's all going to be like
$1 million.
1 trillion billion.
Okay.
Bajillion.
So money actually started out real, and it actually had a purpose. So before money even got going, way back, we're talking 4,000 BC in Samaria, things just started with bartering. So let's say that you were a shepherd and you had sheep. So if you needed bricks to build your house, you would go to the market and you would trade a sheep to the brick maker, and you would get so many bricks. He doesn't know how to raise sheep. He would get a sheep. Everything worked out really well. But there got to be a problem. It got to the point that maybe you already had enough bricks for your house, but you still had actual sheep to sell. So now, if you're still giving them to the brickmaker because his family has to eat, he would basically give you an IOU and basically say, okay, you've given me these bricks. You take this IOU, so in the future, if you or somebody else in your family needs more bricks, you basically redeem this to me. Now, at the time, IOUs were basically preserved on these clay tablets. So what you see here is actually, you think about receipts. I know, Eric, before the show, you said that you just had a receipt to something you just lost. Now they're just these little pieces of paper. That was the first ever receipt in history, at least the first
It's a little
one.
cumbersome.
Yes, you're exactly right. It's very, very cumbersome.
So wait, where were these kept?
So these clay tablets, you would basically
In their back pocket.
Yeah, really. Well, you would store them at your house, but if you went to go to the market, you had to take this entire thing with you. And so the problem is they are very cumbersome. So you could drop one, it would crack. They were really heavy to carry around. And so at first you had to use these actual clay tablets. You would redeem this for your goods. So instead of the clay tablets, they eventually switch over to coins. And at first, they just use materials out of necessity that are like readily available. You've got clay, bone, wood. But as soon as coins are made, you basically have the first ever counterfeiters in history. Since these things are readily available, anybody can start making them, and then they basically fake their own IOUs. So to try to stop the first counterfeiters in history, they start to make them out of precious metals. Originally, the designs on coins were basically just there to try to make them a little bit tougher to counterfeit. So this slide is really, really key. When they start to make them out of precious metals, it's not just a receipt anymore. Because gold and silver were very rare, the coin itself had precious value. So for the first time in history, the bartering is done for the coins themselves, not just the IOU. And that was huge for the seller. So let's say that you were that shepherd. You now are getting...
Are you still there?
Is there anybody out there?
Okay, sorry about that. So let's say that you are the shepherd. You now have a bunch of coins.
Yeah.
You can use them for the bricks. You can use them for whatever you want at the market. You can use them for a wider variety of things. So for the first time in history, wealth starts to get measured not just by the amount of goods you have, but by how much coinage you actually have. Jerry.
So basically, it was a representative currency that was...
Microphone, please.
Busted. So we had, it was a representative currency of a non-valuable material, but in forming clay, spiritual individuals will sometimes make... representations and things of that nature. Do you know anything about the symbols that the original money makers would put on the clay or impress into the clay, and whether that had spiritual significance or not?
It's a great question. I love your readers too. Every time you talk about it, it's like, oh my gosh.
It's a whole new level of intellect
I
over
just
there.
want a really good look at these Oreos.
Yeah. These are some of the oldest coins here. Once you get to Roman times, they basically have symbols of the actual like Caesar and the Roman leaders and stuff like that. So these are some of the oldest coins that you actually have. So I'm not actually sure about all the designs on there. It's a really good question. So today's dollar is not actually real. Most people who are really into money would call it fiat currency. And so fiat, an Italian word that basically means fake or free. So the only reason that it actually has value is because the government says it has value. So like the example that I give in class is to the high school kids, like if they're sitting at lunch in elementary school and a bully comes by and he's like, hey, give me your hamburger, I'm going to give you all these vegetables. You're like, well, I don't want the vegetables. My hamburger's better. And he holds his fist up. He's like, no, take the vegetables. They're really, really good. So you end up making the trade. Essentially, that's what the government's doing. That's fiat money. They're like, hey, take this. It's money. We promise it's really, really good. So it's only worth something because they say it's actually worth something. That's what fiat money means. So prior to the 1700s, the value of these coins actually reflected how much precious metal was in them. So if you had a dollar gold coin, that's because it was actually made out of $1
Okay,
gold.
okay.
So you see all these grooves on the side. Does anybody know why those grooves are actually there? It's got a good bit of history.
To make sure that people weren't lifting the element.
Yeah, Jerry, well done. So it's called reading, and today it's just on there out of tradition. But at the time, since these coins were actually worth real precious metal, before you went to use it at the market, you might think to yourself, you know what, I'm just going to take my knife and just shave just a tiny little bit off. Not enough so that the buyer actually knows it's less, but just a little bit. And if I do that over many, many months, then I'm basically going to have some free gold or some free silver. So they actually put this reading on coins because when somebody would take it to the market, they would examine it. And if they could see all the reading, they would know the coin was still worth what it actually represented.
Okay.
If some of the reading was missing, they would know that they cut some of it off. So today on currency, they basically have it on dimes and quarters, but it's only there out of tradition because we're going to see the coins today aren't worth anything at all.
Yeah,
Jerry.
and I'd like to bring it back to the spiritual significance once again. spiritualists, some of whom deal in what's considered non-physical or spiritual currency, intuit or understand that to steal from an element is highly dangerous. In spiritual practices. So it would probably protect those who thought they were being smart as well.
That's interesting. So the founding fathers were definitely worried about banks. Thomas Jefferson and a number of them really wanted nothing to do with banks, but we're going to see a couple founding fathers did, and they end up winning out. So before we get to any of that, has everybody heard of the Rothschild family?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Eric, what do you know about the Rothschilds? Didn't mean to put you on the spot.
I know wine.
Okay.
I know the wine element for there, but the broader picture is that there's always a conspiracy around that family name that somehow that family is somehow at the core control of the world.
Right. So if anybody is into like New World Order type conspiracies, who's really running the world above presidents and governments, usually it comes back to the Rothschild family. So I can at least explain the origin, and then it's up for everybody to decide how much involvement you really think they have in the world today. So this is basically the patriarch of the Rothschild family, Mayer Rothschild. He has 10 children, 5 sons. Once the sons get older, he teaches them the practice of banking, and he sends them to 5 different countries in Europe, and they start their own banks in those countries. So this is significant because around this time there were other primitive banks, but this is the first one that they start to coordinate across different countries. And then one of the sinister things people say that banks always end up doing is they finance both sides of a war. So one of the conspiracies out there is that basically these wealthy families try to stoke and provoke political tensions. So then when a war starts, the countries at war need loans. Both countries end up borrowing from the same banks.
Naturally.
So thousands of people die. It destroys cities and communities, and then the banks end up profiting.
I'm not sure if this is documented, but did you look into the Knights Templar?
Yes. I'm trying to think if I have that in this one or if that's separate. But that's part of the reason that the Knights are so powerful is after they left the battlefield, right? They amassed their fortune that way.
Well, and the other thing was they pretty much invented banking. Like, it was the first time that you could take this coin, and this coin had this equal value of this coin over here. And even though it wasn't the exact same coin, it was a foreign. We understand that a numerical value is equivalent, but back then, since the inherent value was the material, it was the idea that this coin, it maybe isn't this coin, but it's the same as this coin.
Yeah. No, that's a good call. Like, even after the Knights leave the battlefield, that's how they end up amassing their fortune. No, that's a totally great call. So, by the way, the name Rothschild actually comes, they think, from the red shield that they had on the first banking house. So, like, red shield, Rothschild. That's where the name actually comes from.
Okay.
So, here's Mayer. Here's his 5 sons that he sends to 5 different countries to basically start the banks there. So this is the Rothschild family today. They are considered one of the most powerful families in the world. They tie into a lot of different conspiracies that we might save for another
But their wealth really isn't even really known, right? I mean, like their total wealth really isn't known.
Yeah, I would say most estimates peg it at hundreds of billions of dollars.
Right.
But yeah, you're exactly right. Nobody absolutely knows for sure. So you see a lot of these memes online, and I will say that sometimes the names of the countries change on them, but overall the trend is basically the same. If you look at which countries now do not have an actual globalist finance bank, there's only a couple of them, and it seems to be the countries that the United States is always at war with, which is kind of interesting. So, little background on how banks actually work. I bet most older adults might think they know how banks work, and they don't totally know. And I want to throw a caveat in. Obviously, we need banks. There's really good people that work at banks. Probably a lot of us would not have been able to get our first houses without banks. But banks also do some things that are very, very dangerous, and it could lead to a major crisis in our country someday. So they do lend money at high interest, which is called usury. That's been around since biblical times. Number 2, if people default on their loans, then the bank takes the property back. So they start to have acquisitions that way. But number 3 is the real wild card here. This is what the Rothschilds figured out, and this is what put their banking system ahead of everybody else's, is fractional reserve banking. So you would assume that a bank can only loan out as much money as they actually have on hand. But according to the rules, at least in this country, that's not even close. They only actually have to have 10% on hand at a time. This allows them to basically loan out money they don't have multiple times. So, oh, go ahead, Jerry.
I don't know if this is documented, but I saw a documentary a while back, and it did talk about how when a bank used to loan out, like when you're talking, I don't know if it would be in Sumerian times or times after that. From what I understand, the money changers go all the way back to Phoenicia. When a bank was caught doing that, which is now considered to be standard practice, they were killed.
That's interesting. Like, if you look in the Bible, like, usury was, like, very, very forbidden. That was, like, a terrible thing. So I'm sure that you're right. But today, banks do that all the time.
A bank can do whatever they want. I meant the fractional reserve lending, loaning out more money than they actually have. And back in the day when they were caught doing that, I don't know if it's documented or not, but before this modern banking system, when they caught them doing that, they came together and they killed them.
Yeah, it was a real crime then.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Well, we're going to see it definitely gets the United States in trouble in the 1920s. So, good graphics here. Here's how most people think banks work. So let's say that somebody deposits $100 at bank. The bank can't loan out more than $100. Very safe, right? That's not at all how banks actually work. Here's what banks are actually doing. Let's say you deposit 100 units. Bank is only required to keep 10% of them there at a time. It can take the other $90, loan that out again. Then when people start to pay that back, they only got to keep 10% there and they can reloaning it. So if you actually do the math there, they have basically created $71 out of thin air, and they have loaned the same money simultaneously 2 to 3 different times. If you look, this is just like one transaction. So imagine how many years this has been going on in the United States and how many millions and millions of times this is happening every day.
Wow.
So if you add all this up, it makes a really, really unstable system.
Well, and the other thing is, in our country, that is actually how money is literally created. Like if I go and borrow 60 grand,
yes,
I have literally created $50,000 in the money stream that just simply did not exist. And it's like musical chairs, we just keep creating it, and eventually, who falls down the hole?
You're exactly right. That is one of 2 ways that money is created literally out of thin air. We're going to get to the second one, but yeah, you're spot on, Jer. So, as he alluded to earlier, this definitely leads to trouble, and that's exactly what happened in 1929. There was just rampant market speculation. Stock market gets really, really volatile. Americans start to get nervous. So, people start to grow in mass to withdraw their money from the banks. The problem is the bank doesn't have all their money at once because it's loaning it out multiple times. It's only got 10% on hand.
So the bank got called.
The bank got, yeah, that's a great term for it. The bank gets called. So the bank's basically like, hey, sorry, we don't have your money here. So then people really freak out and they all go try to get their money out. And this basically ushers in the Great Depression. It's basically what you'd call a run on banks.
Have you heard I don't know if it's a theory or a rumor or whatever, that J.P. Morgan started this rumor in order to create the run on the banks?
No, tell me that. That sounds awesome.
Pretty much that he deliberately, a powerful, influential banker, spread it around that the banks are running out of money and literally created this situation to create the crash, to create the Great Depression.
That's
That
not,
happened
that's
like
not
in
unfathomable. Correlation with the stock market also crashing? Or was that like part of that?
That I don't know.
None of that would surprise me. Those industrialists, they were dirty bastards. You had Morgan, you had Henry Ford. Do you know Adolf Hitler had like a couple portraits in his office, and one of them was Henry Ford. He was just a terrible man.
Henry Ford, I think it was a quote. He said, "The average individual has no idea how the modern banking system works, and it is a good thing that if they did, for if the average man did." Paraphrasing, we'd have a revolution overnight.
I think I heard that quote. Yeah, these guys were total rascals. So, quick bit of history, and I can go through this pretty fast, but this is how banks actually start in our country. Then we'll get to what's actually going on today. So, they tried a couple different times to have banks, but a number of founding fathers resisted it. So, for a while, they held off a central bank, but eventually it comes in. So, this was attempt number 1. They called it the Bank of North America. And it's kind of cool how public offerings actually work. They basically had 400 shares for the bank. Investors bought them at $1,000 each. So that's $400,000 of startup capital. Doesn't sound like a lot, but keep in mind this is 1781. So then they can take that 400 grand and start loaning that out to other people and getting the interest off of that. So that bank survives for a few years. By 1783, even though we had just won the Revolutionary War, the new colonies, the new country, is very, very vulnerable because we're totally buried in debt for the war. So we've got to get more money. Problem number 2, overly tight battle pants.
Can I jump in real quick?
Please.
When we fought the Revolutionary War, we always talk about how we broke away from England. And however, if we want to really take a look at history, we were being taxed here, the tariffs and the taxes, and it was having to do with, what was it? It was a British war with somebody or other, I don't know. And it was a whole taxation without representation and blah, 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 blah. But it was the same Rothschild bank. So really, if we look at it through the lens of follow the money, we didn't even break away from England. We fought a Revolutionary War against a central bank that owned and controlled and fostered, war and all kind of misdeeds. And I feel like personally that's number one why they never called it a central bank ever, and number two, why we've been fighting so hard against this, because we fought a revolutionary war over this whole thing, and that founded this country.
You're giving me great segues. So the question is, did we really beat England, or did we just get enslaved to England in a different way? You're spot on. That's going to come up in just a second.
That's
here.
awesome. But, the Amish, they call us the English.
No, do they?
Absolutely.
With everything crazy going on in the country, like the other day I was driving through Sinking Valley over by us, and there's a lot of Amish and Mennonites, and I just see them just like out in their yards working, like no technology. I'm just like, I think they have it figured out.
I really just look at them like, how do you do that? Now I'm like,
right?
Yeah.
I want to go join them.
I wonder if you can do that. Like, if you're from outside the community, can you just show up? You're like, hey, I
believe
you
so.
guys got it figured out.
What's really funny is I worked with a guy in a blue collar setting.
Yeah, y'all have fun with that.
I worked with a guy in a blue collar setting, and he was like, you would never know this, but they have these barn parties, and he's like, it's not what you think. He's like,
having orgies in there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to put their stuff on the street, but he was like, you'll have a wild. He's like, if you don't get invited, do not show up. But he's like, you wouldn't believe it, man. These barn parties.
Well, and a lot of people
just sit and pray all day. They're still human beings.
Yeah, right they are.
Well, a lot of people that are like running from the law.
They join the Amish.
Yeah, because they're. I don't want to say they're untouchable there, but the
We'll hide
Amish will protect them. Yes.
We'll hide them.
Shouldn't put that out there either, but I guess it's like.
Now
The Amish are hiding
I know.
fugitives. You heard it here on the Eric McKenna project.
It reminds me of that old movie, A Stranger Among Us. It was like there was one person in this community that didn't belong there, and everything got all twisted up psychologically. Stranger Among Us. That's like an early '90s movie. It was a really good film.
The only thing I know about it, what was the Harrison Ford movie? Was it Witness, where he goes to join the Amish?
I didn't see that.
Yeah,
I didn't see
he was
that.
investigating murder or something, right?
Every time I leave here, I have a long list of movies to watch.
That's a good movie.
So people will hide out with the Amish cast?
Yeah. And especially if they were part of the community before. I guess that's pretty popular. Because, like, young people and things like that, they'll, leave the community. And then, yeah, and then they can't adjust to normal society really well. So
All day long.
they do Rumspringer. So then they
Go rob a
run back
bank
to
for
the
Rumspringer.
Amish. Sometimes they take people with them if they've made friends with whoever. So yeah.
Is that year that they have when they're like teenagers, where they have that
Rumspringer.
1 year to just go do whatever?
Wait, is that Rumspringer? Is that what that is?
Yeah, that's when they're like
Yeah.
16 or 17.
Yeah.
They live like heathens.
Yeah. It makes you a better Amish if you go out and join the heathens and then come back.
It makes you a better Amish.
So attempt number 2, they then try to start the first bank in the United States, because now the United States is a country. So this is Alexander Hamilton. This is his big push. So he pushes for a central bank, and they're going to try it for basically 20 years here to see if it will actually work out. So by 1792, they established the U.S. Mint. Now, a lot of people don't realize what the Mint actually does. The Mint only handles the actual coins of the country. The paper money, the more important money, is the U.S. Bureau of Engraving and Printing. Although we're going to see now today, most money is just electronic. So Hamilton's goals look pretty noble on the surface. Basically, the government takes on the war debts of the states, because at this point, the states are still sort of their own independent entities.
Okay.
So they're going to pay that off, they're going to raise money for the new government, and this is really key, they're going to have a common currency. Because up to this point, if you traveled across state lines in the colonies, you basically had to exchange your currency for whatever was used in that state. So you could have 13 colonies, you could have 13 different currencies. So now they're just going to have one for the new country.
Okay.
So Alexander Hamilton wins, but then in a way he loses. He ends up getting killed in the most famous duel in history by Aaron Burr. So he doesn't actually live to see his vision fulfilled. So that charter runs out, and we're almost done here with like the nitty-gritty history. So attempt number 3, and this gets what Jerry was talking about before. Second Bank of the United States. Federal government only holds 20% of the capital. 80% is held by Europeans. And so this is the shady part where some of the founding fathers are like, wait a minute, we just defeated the British. Now you're still going to let Europeans control 80% of our money supply here. Andrew Jackson, who partied hard and was a pretty hardcore president, was also very, very much for what's called hard money. So he was a traditionalist, taking you back to like Sumerian times. He wanted the physical gold, the physical
gold
silver.
standard. He wanted a real gold standard.
Exactly. So good quote here from Jackson, basically saying that of the central bank, over 8 million shares were held by foreigners. And when he says foreigners, he basically means Europeans and the British. So were we essentially putting ourselves back under their control again after just fighting them off, as Jerry had alluded to? All right, time to get to a history of presidential assassinations relating to banking here. So during the Civil War era, the Union is heavily in debt. And so they basically temporarily create their own fiat currency to start paying those things off. So they issued what were called greenbacks, and it was called that because the back of it was essentially green. If you look at the back of it, though, you can see it looks very, very similar to our own dollar bill today. So Lincoln needed even more money. Congress drew a line, said no more greenbacks. Those Oreos look
Rip it. Rip it open.
Let's do it. It can be edited out.
I guess it's okay to pass this over to the other side. Are you sure?
Can you pass that across the wall over here? Over here.
I'm gonna give it across. You want to?
Oh yeah.
You alright with that? We don't have to.
Where's the?
Do you want to take some more for the road?
We don't have to.
I'll tell you what. I'll give you 1 Oreo and you owe me 3.
Oh, okay. That is how
This is a
works.
practice and
Okay,
what we're
so
learning today.
One here. Here.
I've had other
those
guests on this show ask me
And
how
also-
come when they show up there's no Oreos.
Hey, she beat me at this game. How'd that work?
I'm
You're
giving
not
them
supposed to
you.
pay me back out of my Oreos.
Well,
You owe me.
It's like Oreo banking.
You got to go out and earn some Oreos.
See,
That's
now
our
I'm-
own
but now I'm
currency.
also stealing one
I'm
too.
the Oreo pimp.
Look, I gave the one that we exchanged for, but then I also stole one from the bank.
She beat me at that game.
I found some mega stuff.
She
too.
beat the criminals always
these
win.
megas?
That's That's the
Yeah,
answer to
they're
that.
megas.
The criminals
Oh,
always win at the banking game.
So is this
You calling me a
Lost
criminal?
half of mine.
bigger than? Oh my gosh, these are like little ice cream sandwiches. So this is bigger than double stuff.
They're mega
Without
stuff.
the refrigerator, right?
Is the ratio okay here? I'm worried this is going to throw the ratio.
You'll be
off.
okay.
All right. At some point, you guys are going to need to talk a lot.
It's
so I can
currency.
eat these Oreos.
Currency.
Here, I'm going to pass these back over. All right.
Back
I
to
would be
Jared.
okay with switching to Oreos as currency.
I would be okay with that too.
I think they used to use seashells too. I heard that at one point way back in the day.
Oreos would be a lot of self-control though. Like you would have all this money, but then you would just start eating your own money. So
I'd have to protect my house
Getting
because
high
I'd be
on your own
rich.
cash.
I would be
or
so
else you could be
rich.
broke. One of the two. It depends. If you ate your own
Right now,
currency.
I'm rich. Overnight, I don't know. Can't tell you.
So Lincoln passes the National Banking Act, and some people think this, not slavery, is actually what got him assassinated. So he basically tried to get the United States away from the influence of European banks by loaning out their own money through government bonds. So here's where the conspiracy starts to come in. 1811, the first charter of the first Bank of the United States is not renewed. The very next year, the British re-invade, and that's the War of 1812. Something that happened actually because of banking. So during this war, ironically, Andrew Jackson becomes a hero. They defeat the British at the Battle of New Orleans. So then, Andrew Jackson, a hard money man, vetoes renewing the charter for the second bank. Less than 2 years later, he survives an assassination attempt. President Abraham Lincoln is assassinated at Ford's Theater officially by a Confederate sympathizer. But a lot of people think that the assassination was actually because he was trying to break America free from the European bankers.
Okay.
Meanwhile, interesting, the Confederacy is still borrowing heavily from European bankers. So it would have been in the interest of the European bankers for the Confederacy to prevail. So some think that they basically had their hands in putting Wilkes Booth up to it, to actually assassinating Lincoln. 2 more presidents are going to succumb after they challenge the central bank. So, quote right here, everybody, from James Garfield: "Whomever controls the volume of money in our country is an absolute master of all industry and commerce. The entire system is very easily controlled one way or another by a few powerful men at the top." And the crazy thing to me, look at the date there. He says this in 1881. So people already realized this over 100 years ago. He says this in July. Less than 3 months later, he's assassinated. William McKinley is assassinated in 1901. Like Jackson, he was also a hard money man. He advocates for a gold standard, which we're going to get to. So he's assassinated in 1901. A little over a decade later, the Federal Reserve Act is passed. So Jerry mentioned making money. We're going to see that this is the second way that money is basically poof, made out of thin air here in the United States. All right. So to the greatest assassination of them all in American history, at least, JFK. So can you guys share, like, when they talk about JFK assassination conspiracies, like, who are some of the culprits that are usually thrown out?
Russians, Cubans, mafia,
Right.
The fucking CIA.
CIA.
One of the interesting theories gets back to UFOs a little bit. Did you guys know that JFK, 11 days prior to his assassination, actually ordered that all UFO files be declassified and shared with the Soviet Union? And it sounds made up because you think, well, it's the Cold War at the time. Why are we sharing anything with Russia? Kennedy's concern and Khrushchev's concern in the Soviet Union was a UFO would show up in the airspace of one of our countries. They would assume it was attack from the other country, and then they would basically start a nuclear war. And so 11 days prior to his assassination, Kennedy actually wants to share those things. So maybe it was the UFO thing, or maybe it was the money thing. So what you see here, if you look at that bill, it looks a lot like a dollar bill, but it's a little bit different.
One more thing, just real quick.
Please.
Kennedy also made a speech about secret societies, warning us about secret O's, secret societies. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
Yeah, but that was something that to me, like, because, you know, there's Skull and Bones and the Masonic Brotherhood, and also really in truth the Illuminati or the Illuminatus, which there's kind of a story there, but we can get into that later.
I've got that speech on my laptop.
Do you really?
I think that's Kennedy's second best speech after the moon landing
That should have been his fucking farewell speech.
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
He should have pulled an Eisenhower and done that at the end of his presidency, so he could have lived and done something good in his life.
A lot of people think Kennedy is one of the only presidents to ever actually challenge secret societies. He also is the only modern president so far to actually challenge the banking system. So what you see here isn't a dollar bill. This is actually a silver certificate. So he is trying to break the United States away from the Federal Reserve, which we're going to see in a minute isn't federal at all. So the United States has a burgeoning silver supply.
Okay.
Kennedy wants to only issue enough notes that we have silver to actually back it up. So in that example I gave before, this would be like...
It wouldn't be a fiat system, though.
Exactly. Like, it would be like $100 in, $100 out, and that's it. No fractional reserve. So if you look at...
Novel, huh?
Yeah, seriously. If you look at a side-by-side, if any of you actually have, or if any of our listeners or viewers have these things at the top with the blue seal on, definitely save them. You can see it is an actual silver certificate. What this meant is, during Kennedy's time, you could take this to the bank at any time and you could redeem it for $1 worth of actual real silver. So this was legit. What we use on the bottom now is called a Federal Reserve note, and we're going to see that's not backed by anything at all. So then we all know what happened on November 22nd, 1960.
Actually, none of us know what happened.
That's a great call.
To be honest with you, no one knows.
I've got-
That's the fucking problem.
You're right.
No one knows.
I got a whole separate thing on the Kennedy assassination.
That
You
should
wanna
be
do
a
that
whole
sometime?
show. That should be a whole
We
show
can do that.
for
We
sure.
can definitely pull
That
that
definitely
off.
should be a show.
Yeah.
I
really
got
could.
I got a theory. I'll hop in on that show.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get Cyril Weck on here. I've been trying because he's like the authority.
That name sounds really familiar.
Cyril Weck is the coroner, the famous Pittsburgh coroner, who was
Yeah.
part of the, I think the group that was part of the autopsy, or maybe
Yeah.
years later, he did an independent autopsy of what happened. And
Really?
he believed that it wasn't a single bullet
Yeah.
or whatever. It was
Oh,
a
yeah.
multiple thing.
I'm just gonna throw my theory out there now, so we don't have to worry about it later.
Go ahead.
Super string theory. You know, you're familiar.
Yeah.
Super strings.
So you think it basically, the assassination happened in one reality, but we're in like a parallel reality to that?
Maybe there was a bunch of realities revolving around, and at the wrong time, and there was no bullet.
Oh,
What?
no bullet at all.
No, super strings. You know what I mean? The long.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. And it just kind of.
They never found the bullet. Was there a bullet lodged in his head? Did they find? a
Well,
bullet?
interestingly, they found a bullet, but then on the bed that Kennedy's body was on, when it was there at the medical center, somebody had placed another bullet on the bed right beside it.
It's so corrupt.
They had to make
really
it
is.
make
It's
sense
so corrupt.
outside of quantum reality because, you know what I mean? If it doesn't make any sense and we can't find a way to like cognize what happened, people just can't deal with it and move on. The other thing was the Watchman. Did you ever see that?
Yeah.
I couldn't sit through that movie. Everybody said I should. It was a
It's
long
so
one,
good.
wasn't it?
Anyway, there's like an alternate reality where we had like Dr. Manhattan, who was like this fucking lightning god and went in there and fucking won the Vietnam War, and it shows the not the Joker, it was what was that dude's name?
Comedian.
The comedian, the same guy that played Negan, the same actor that played Negan,
I remember his
and they
name.
show him right there on the grassy knoll just like smiling.
Yeah.
Eric,
not
you're
gonna
really
watch
into
it.
the high-end physics stuff. We should.
Yeah.
Don't you get that physics professor from Duquesne on your show a lot? Mm-hmm. It'd be neat to merge the worlds and have him on.
Unified
with
theory.
us.
Do
Would
it.
he do that?
I wouldn't be surprised. He probably would.
Really?
Dr. Cooper. Yeah.
That would be really,
Good
really
guy.
nice.
You all would dig him for
Theory.
sure.
Yeah.
You'll
yeah.
dig him for
I
We
sure.
should get Gary on this motherfucker. Is he still alive?
I was just about to say that. I think he is, but I think he's not well. I don't know.
We'll shock him back to life. We'll get his ass in. He taught us a lot about. We used to smoke marijuana and tobacco, and we just sit there and I'd ask him about quantum theory, quantum physics, quantum mechanics, superstring theory, unified theory, and like talk about how they projected it into the different like computer programs in a two-dimensional space in order to project all these different dimensions. And he was like, right now we know there are at least 27 dimensions. I'm sitting there high as fuck. I was like, all right.
Like 15, 16 years old. Like you're like, mine's about to.
I think that's the problem.
I'm
Is
just
that
saying, like, I'm
there's,
with it,
there's
Gary.
just
I'm
too much
totally with
dispute
it.
between how many
I'm here
dimensions
for it.
there are. And that's what the argument is. They can't unify because everybody's got different. Not everybody, but there's different opinions of how many dimensions there are.
And then in
that's
Dark,
the core of it, I believe.
in Dark
with
Mission,
string
they
theory.
talked about the higher mathematical dimensions and stuff.
That's a good book.
Yeah,
What is it? What is it?
Dark Mission: The Secret History of NASA.
It's a heavy read, but it's good. And they get into the Kennedy assassination, that book, too.
He claimed in his editorial in the second release that basically like members of like Pentagon and NASA and stuff like that, and even presidents, they're like, it's too much to catch you up on. Read this fucking book.
No way, really? That book?
That's what he says in his own editorial. Now, whether you can trust him at his word, whether that is the official, like, hey, you're with the CIA now, read this book if you want to know
Is
what's
it
going on.
Richard Hoagland and Mike Barra, the authors?
I'll be honest with you, this is yet another book that I didn't read.
Oh, you didn't read the book? Oh.
I know a lot about books you've never read
Side
before.
note, I actually finally found our copy of Future Shock. Like I
I'm
haven't.
never reading it.
I don't know that I will
I'm going
either.
to make all kind of claims and statements about it and never read the book.
I read it because of you guys, and now
Is it good?
Yeah.
Oh, sweet. No, I read like
He's like, oh, sweet.
the first maybe 20, 25 pages.
Yeah, it's a heavy read.
Enough to learn about Mars and stuff. And the other thing was the three factions in NASA, which was the Masonic Brotherhood, the Magicians, and also the Nazis.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a wild book. Hey, quick side note about physicists and marijuana.
We do everything here, don't we? We do
He
everything.
capped me out with that one.
I looked at you and I couldn't give a straight face.
So Carl Sagan wrote a number of pro-marijuana editorials for a weed magazine, and he did it under the pseudonym of Mr. X.
Yeah.
I'm hearing about that.
And he claimed that he made a lot of his own discoveries. He would get baked, then stand in the shower and smear soap bubbles all over the wall, and then just start drawing in the soap bubbles.
I should not have taken
just
a sip of
high as a
Pepsi
kite.
before this. That is awesome.
And that's how he figured out
I
a lot of
think
weed.
so. Richard Feynman is probably in modern times the most famous physicist. He's not a rock star physicist like we hear today with modern, but go back 40, 50 years, Feynman was the guy. And he out in San Francisco, I don't know if it was at Cal State or whatever where he did his work, but I think he got baked and took LSD on a regular basis. I'm quite sure of that.
Well, and he ended up having cancer because where Feynman was famous at the end of his life is he was one of the guys called
Space
in
Shuttle.
for the Space Shuttle Challenger inquiry.
Yeah, Richard Feynman, one of the most genius scientists ever.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, Aldous Huxley wrote some amazing essays, Doors of Perception and also Heaven and Hell. And the band The Doors borrowed from, like, the band The Doors, which was obviously very influential, Jim Morrison, who was more of a poet than, a singer. That's where that name, The Doors, came from, The Doors of Perception.
I did not know that.
You want to talk about a heavy read sentence that just goes, it's all about, like, taking the peyote buttons. Aldous Huxley actually wrote Brave New World and then had experiences with psychotropic, mind-expanding substances. And
Who's the guy who, we're all over the place, but who's the guy who invented LSD?
invented.
Oh, hell.
San Francisco.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he discovered the ergot fungus. That's
Okay.
where they synthesize it, but when ergot rots, that's where that.
Okay. Well, I listened to that song "Kid Charlemagne" by Steely Dan, and the whole song is based upon him
I can't remember. I think it was a doctor.
and
or
leaving.
something.
And
Yeah.
like,
Oh, hell, it's on the tip of my brain. It's funny, I typed in who invented it. It said, who invented the light bulb? Nope. Not this time, Google. Not what we're going for this time. Albert Hoffman?
Okay.
Sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that
All
song
right.
was written. That song, "Kid Charlemagne" by Steely Dan, very famous song, was written about his. I think him, and then having all this success, making all this money, and in the lyrics are really fantastically woven together, and then it all crashes down on him because
She and I did highly dangerous
He had
levels of
escaped.
LSD.
just the
I feel like we need Fred here. I feel like Fred's going to be
Fred's-
watching the
Fred-
show and be like, ah!
Fred's the missing link.
Fred's got those eyeballs.
Fred is the missing link.
Fred's
Sorry,
got
Fred.
those eyeballs pinging.
Okay, back to the
That's
money
okay.
manipulation.
All right, so some of you already mentioned gold standard.
Yeah.
So here's where it actually comes from. And it goes to show FDR, despite being a 4-term president and overall fairly beloved,
What a
was
joke.
absolute son of a gun. So by 33, the U.S. mostly abandons the gold standard. So what that meant is prior to this, our banking system was pretty solid. They would only issue as many notes as they had actual gold to back it up. So let's say the U.S. in the 30s had $50 billion of
Yeah.
gold at Fort Knox. They would
Sounds
only
reasonable.
issue up to $50 billion. So FDR, when he abandons it, people don't realize this is real. He actually signs an order demanding all U.S. citizens give their gold back. And if the U.S. citizens don't give the gold back, they would be thrown in jail for it. So essentially, they give back their gold, real money, and then they just get paper notes, fiat money in return. The reason this is key is once the United States has all the gold back, they can basically adjust the exchange rate then. Say, okay, now dollar bills are worth this much gold. And
Well,
they
how
can-
did that go?
They robbed him at
Back then?
gunpoint,
Did
pretty
they
much.
actually do it? Did the public cooperate?
I mean, you can never totally tell how effective it is, but most people gave their gold back for
I'm
fear.
thinking the mob in New York City isn't giving the gold back.
Well, and plus, too, at the time, like today, if you bought gold, especially if you did it with a credit card, they would have a record of that transaction. They would know. Back then,
Yeah.
probably a lot of gold was just exchanged.
No
so
doubt.
people who didn't give it back probably came out very well. All right, here's where things take us into modern times. And here's where things also get super, super sketch with Fort Knox. By 65, so if you notice, that's only 2 years after JFK is assassinated, Coinage Act takes almost all of the silver out of coins. So remember this date, 65, actually 64. It's going to come up again at the end. So they've already attacked the gold. Now they're attacking the silver. By 71, no gold standard anymore. They're just starting to print money regardless of the gold. By 77, all the precious metals are taken out of coins. So today, coins are basically just a placeholder. They're just made of like copper and zinc, which is worth hardly anything at all.
So there's no silver and nickels.
Correct. Today there's no silver. Now, if this sounds shady to you, other countries also thought it was shady, including countries like China that hold a lot of our debt. So in the early 2000s, they demanded to actually inspect the gold at Fort Knox, because we always hear about all the gold reserves at Fort Knox. It was in a James Bond movie, like they were going to try to blow up all the gold in Fort Knox. So how much is actually there?
Goldfinger, right?
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, also that Die Hard movie, Die Hard with a Vengeance. That wasn't Fort Knox, but it was kind of something similar.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to see Die Hard. I'm embarrassed to say I've only seen the original Die Hard within the last year.
It's not a Christmas movie.
I was going to ask that.
Check it out, man. There's the third one, and it has Samuel L. Jackson and Bruce Willis.
Yeah.
Oh my God, is it good?
Yeah.
At what point does Die Hard go off the rails? Like, at what point are you like,
I
they
was-
made too many Die Hards?
The first one's really good. The second one's good.
I've seen the second one. It's solid.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
solid. But the third one with Samuel L. Jackson,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
agree. It's very good.
Do you think Samuel L. Jackson is a zombie? The man never ages. Like, he has looked exactly the same for the last 30 years.
Maybe he's a vampire.
Yeah.
I got a side presentation on that, too, on vampires.
Oh, Jesus.
Plenty
Jesus.
material.
Crackers.
Crackers. Cheese and crackers.
So the United States brings in these foreign dignitaries.
Okay.
For starters, they don't show them all the gold in Fort Knox. They just show them a tiny amount. Secondly, they don't do what's called center drilling through the bars. They only do edge drilling. Now, why is this important? A bar of lead has almost the same specific gravity, which basically means
gold-plated,
the
right?
same weight as a bar of gold. So if you want to fake like you got a lot of gold, you take a lead bar, you cover it with a thinner layer of gold, and then you just drill through the edge of it.
Wasn't that like
Well, that's
the,
that's not hazardous.
wasn't that like
Handling
the
that stuff's not
premise of
hazardous at all.
alchemy was to like turn lead into gold?
Oh my God, good call.
Yeah.
Right?
Good freaking call. Yeah, it was. Wait a second. What is center or what is this? I can.
So center drilling would mean you take a drill bit and you go right through the middle of the bar.
Just to prove it. was
That's more
gold.
credible, yeah, because then people can look at it, they can see gold the entire way through.
Sure.
U.S. wouldn't allow that. They only drilled through the edge. By the way, alchemy, great call, Julia. They can actually transmutate atoms of lead into gold now, but they can only do it a couple atoms at a time, and they spend so much energy on it that they don't
Not
actually
worth it.
make money off it yet. Yeah, but that's a good call.
There
for
it is, the
alchemy.
scientific
So,
basis
kinda
for
like crypto
transmutation.
What's that, Eric?
Kind of like crypto mining.
Yeah.
Wow.
You spend so much energy, you're not making it.
We're going to get to crypto. That's coming up. So 53 is the last time that the gold holdings at the fort are actually audited. And even then, it wasn't a real
1953?
audit. 53. Even then, they only tested 5% of it. And since then, the government has sold off most of the gold at Fort Knox. But people don't know this because here's the crazy thing. When the government reports their gold, they can actually report all of it that they have loaned out or sold. So the example I give to my students, that would be like you saying, if you counted up all the money that you have ever spent for things, and you're like, hey, I'm a millionaire. I have all this money. It's like, no, you don't. You spent all that money and you gave it to other people. But this is exactly what the U.S. government does with their gold. They're not just counting how much they have. They're counting all the money that they've loaned out or sold to other people. Totally shady. So a lot of people think there's really no gold even left at Fort Knox.
Yeah,
right
why
now.
can't we go see a tour of Fort Knox?
Right.
Yeah, and actually, Ron
I mean,
Paul.
you won't show me Area 51. You won't show me Fort Knox. I mean,
Ron Paul actually was leading a vote in order to audit the Federal Reserve, and also wanted to audit
audit the Fed.
Well, yeah, and also audit Fort Knox to make sure, number one, to see if the United States citizens have been robbed of the gold, and secondly, if so, by who. And I think it was 10 individuals voting, and they voted it down like 8-2. No, we don't need to know that. The American people don't need to know that.
Of course, that's not important.
I don't know how Ron Paul and Rand Paul honestly haven't been assassinated
walking
yet.
around.
I know, right? Right?
I loved Ron Paul,
Bernie
man.
Sanders
He
might
was
be
the-
next.
Ron Paul was the last candidate I really believed in. And they, from what I understand, they changed the Republican caucus to basically eliminate the grassroots campaigning that got him close to the presidency.
Is that right? That's fascinating. Because he challenged the actual, like, if you really look at Republicans and Democrats, for the most part, at the end of the day are basically on the same team. So that's why
they're
anytime
same animal.
yeah, absolutely.
Same animal.
There's a really good documentary about all this stuff. How I learned like the basis and the premises that you did a really great job presenting here. It's called From Freedom to Fascism.
Oh.
It's by David Russo. He did, I think, When Harry Met Sally was a director, and supposedly David Rockefeller. And he says this in an interview. David Rockefeller reached out to him. Famous people want to meet each other, and they struck up a friendship. And David Rockefeller, who had like 6 fucking hearts before he finally fucking died.
Wow.
David Rockefeller had like 6 fucking heart
Just keep
transplants.
getting heart transplant.
Anyway,
It was his hobby.
they struck up a friendship, and this was pre 9/11, and eventually, according to the interview, David Russo said that he said you're going to see a war that never ends. You're going to see a major catastrophe. You're going to see people running around looking for caves, looking in caves for individuals you never see, and it's all going to be this false war in order to set up this new one world government. And David Russo's like, but why? Like, why would you want to do this? You have more money than God. This would be hurting people. Like, why? Why would you people want to do this? And apparently David Rockefeller was just like, what do you care about people? You take care of yourself. You take care of your family. That's what it is. And from what I understand, David Russo broke with Rockefeller. Or what was his name? Aaron Russo? David Russo? Russo's the name.
Aaron Russo, maybe.
Aaron Russo might have been it. But it's a great documentary. They interview Ron Paul before he ran for president. It's amazing.
The amount of one world government, new world order, great reset references today is really, really alarming. So a lot of people think that this is basically in the final stages and they're making a push for this by like 2030. And part of the reason we're seeing the crazy stuff with money today is they are intentionally trying to crash the system, because crashing the system then gives them their justification for the great reset and to have this one world government that they really want.
Can I be a piece of garbage? Can I plug my band?
Of course.
Shameless self-promotion. This is one of Winter's Descent's singles. All hail to the one world order, bow down to the great destroyer. Come all you true believers, the new kingdom come.
Right on.
That's
I like
solid.
that one.
Very.
It's a song called Fortune, actually.
First single you guys released in how long?
Let's not talk about how long it's taking me to
Go download it.
Let's not
Go
talk about
download it.
That one's
now.
already out.
Winter's
That one's,
Descent.
that one's
take
already
it.
been out.
Let's not talk about how it's taken 7 years to release a 5-song EP.
Well, I wasn't
Go
talking
get
about
it
that.
now.
I was
think it's
talking
more
about how
like
that
5
was the
years.
first one that you had released in a long time.
That's true.
Nice
First
job,
single.
Terry.
Oh yeah, my voice is all trash. I've been smoking. It sounds better on the single, I promise.
So today, our currency is once again basically fiat money. And I put Bitcoin up there because when crypto first came out, I thought, there's no way the government's going to allow this because it's not backed by anything. Like Eric, as you said, you basically just mine it. You set up a dedicated computer for many weeks or now many months to basically create a Bitcoin. Like, even though they show these things, this is just like symbolic. There aren't actually these coins with like the fancy B on them. But initially I thought, this is why governments aren't calling out cryptocurrencies, because if you really call out cryptocurrencies for their imaginary mining, then basically crypto could call out the fact that the US dollar is basically made up too. But got an update for you. So I knew the US government would not be able to keep their hands off this forever. So they see the potential of cryptocurrencies essentially breaking free of the European banking systems. So in March of this year, President Biden actually took the first step towards not only trying to regulate cryptocurrency, but basically having the U.S. government put out their own version of crypto to overtake the other ones.
Does he even understand what cryptocurrency is? I'll be honest with you.
I don't want to get political, but I would say
Well, no. I mean, like,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it
I would
isn't
say no.
specific to him.
Right.
Probably that could be addressed to a lot of different politicians
Right.
of that age era.
Sure.
Do they even understand?
I wouldn't think so.
You know what I mean?
To be fair, I don't.
The average
really
person on the
understand
street
it.
probably doesn't really get it.
Right. I would agree with that.
From what I understand, it has to do with quantum computers.
Yes.
The
it's-
computing power of quantum computers.
Yes, and part of it is because the US dollar is so unstable, globally, when countries would trade with each other, they would always want to go through the same medium, and that medium was always the US dollar.
Got it.
And so one of the dangers now to the United States is they're either going to shift to Chinese currency or they're
Right.
going to go to crypto.
Right.
And part of crypto is it's very secure. Like Jerry talked about with quantum computers, and they have what's called blockchain
Yeah.
technology.
Yep.
So it also
Yeah,
allows.
I tried to like learn about that and it didn't
Yeah.
make any sense to me at all.
How do you mine for cryptocurrency? Where
just
the
don't-
fuck is it?
I don't get it at all.
Right.
It's not out back.
This
I'm
was the
being
same thing when I
dead
tried to learn
serious.
about NFTs and like what that meant. I was just
I
like,
was glad you brought that up because the
Right.
NFTs are like the original digital like piece of art, and
yeah,
that ties
exactly.
into cryptocurrency
and you can like
as
make
well.
copies, and like and like if it's a limited run, then each copy has like a certain amount of value in the same way that like an artist would make prints. I guess
People take a lot of photos of me in traffic. I have a feeling people are making a lot of money off my face.
There's NFTs of you all over.
Do you
Yeah.
understand NFTs?
It's like
I
the
forget what's that-
ownership.
yeah, what's that stand-
Non-fungible.
Non-fungible tokens.
What a weird word.
It's almost
Fungible.
like you,
It's like
if
an
you own the
original digital piece of
NFT, it
art.
doesn't mean you physically own the art.
No.
You own the,
the rights to it.
Yeah, you own
I guess.
the ability
just
to
have this
I can't see how that's enforceable,
digital,
though.
non-physical, almost like spiritual currency. You know what I mean? It's almost
Well-
like, remember the Joker? He was like, I want my face on a $1 bill. And then he had all that artwork, and it was like those weird red skulls and stuff. Those are the paintings he wanted. The original artwork that
Yeah.
was
I don't know,
more,
it's weird.
it was
So-
like digital, but also spiritual. I don't know.
There's a quote from Pliny the Elder, way back in the times of Greeks, and he's basically like, something is worth what the purchaser will pay for it. So basically, what makes something valuable? So when you see things like crypto NFTs, basically people are dabbling in things of a finite quantity to see if they're actually valuable. So like
Well,
Jerry
creating
mentioned
scarcity.
yeah, so like Jerry mentioned, like how in the world do you mine it? But in fairness to crypto, it's actually more regulated than the Federal Reserve. As we're going to see in a minute, the Federal
But
Reserve
it's
can just,
self-regulated, right?
Yeah.
It's self-regulated by the quote-unquote community of people that are using it.
yeah. So if you could mine a Bitcoin in a day, then Bitcoin would be worth nothing
Right.
because there would be literally millions and millions
Right.
of Bitcoins out there. It's intentionally made difficult and time-consuming so that the amount of Bitcoins out there slowly
Kind of
grows.
like life.
Yeah, how about that? Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And,
life.
and that way it's not like the blood diamonds where you have to, like De Beers, convince people it's super valuable when there's actually a ton of diamonds, and tie it in with an emotional sentiment and an idea that would
That's
be
a whole show.
2 months
It
salary
is.
for an
Value of
engagement
diamonds.
ring, and then control, with subversive means over in Africa on the blood diamonds. And there's tons of diamonds. They only release so many.
The Beers are bastards. Have you guys seen that movie Blood
That's
Diamond?
a corrupt family.
It's so good.
It's been a long time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's a whole show.
Diamonds are a girl's best friend. And she got killed.
They look so great. They look so great.
Not funny, but I mean, yeah, she died.
The Fed.
But well, speaking of the NFTs though, like you have to be careful because you can also see when you try to do this stuff, the market can fall out. Like over the past 10 years, we've seen the market drop out of baseball cards, beanie babies. Like my friend's wife had all these valuable beanie babies. She had them in like glass cases, but then the value just fell out of them. So you've got to be super careful with this stuff because what actually makes it valuable? Once people decide it doesn't, then it's totally gone.
Well, and that's one of the things that I think you made a great point is when something has inherent value, and that's I think with the NFTs. Like, if you have an NFT that's cool as fuck, that everybody just wants to look at it. Like, can I look at it for another minute or two? And it has value,
Right.
Like I just found my old Magic.
But if it's on the my argument is if it's on the web, it's I can't right click and download the JPEG.
Right.
But I can screenshot that son of a bitch, and it might not print at great resolution.
Right.
But I can share that thing digitally.
Right.
And most people consume their photographs anyways on a screen.
Right.
So I just don't see how there can be any integrity with it. Like I mean, they must have it figured out. I just don't get it.
I love the print screen button. I just run rampant with that thing. Most powerful button on the keyboard.
I've
right
stolen
there.
so much stuff over the years. I got everything it's amusing to me. I got a copy of it somewhere.
It's
Well, I
such a
mean,
good
you got
button.
artwork all over this place. I mean, it exists in physical reality because that's more of an old school type. But like
Yeah.
nowadays, a lot of artwork only exists. It will never be printed.
Well, and that's kind of like what they're talking about with like the NFTs is like it's like so that people can have artwork for their digital like real estate.
Their
'Cause
digital space. Yeah.
Because people are like buying digital real estate now, and that's also like a form of NFT. But then like the other NFTs that they're buying to like decorate their digital space with.
I don't
is like,
get it.
I mean,
it's just so beyond my
they're just
understanding.
pushing towards the Matrix.
Maybe it's like Inception. You know, people just do this shared dreaming, and then they all hang out at each other's digital cribs.
The crazy thing about the digital stuff, if there's ever an EMP pulse fired off and it's not protected, like all that stuff's just wiped out. Like my mother-in-law still takes the time to digitally print a lot of photos. Like we kind of like teased her about for a little bit, but I thought, you know what? I think she's onto something there. Because like if there's ever a big EMP pulse, all the digital stuff could just get totally wiped out, and then you're going to be back to like the actual physical, tangible things again.
So the couple of years that I was photographing the rock band Kiss fans are just like no other. They'll spend a crazy amount of money on stuff. So I would get people that would want to buy prints from me, and I didn't know any better. I wasn't a photographer, so I would just send. Nah, I ain't gonna buy nothing. I'll just send you the file. You can print it off, for your own.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know any better
right.
because, and after about a month or two, a couple other photographers was like, "You're out of your mind. If people value that print,
Yeah.
sell the file."
Plus, they probably took your file and started to make the prints themselves. and sell
Probably,
them back.
yeah, probably. But it was almost like my thing was I guess I couldn't see the value in it because I could just see someone taking a screenshot of something if I tried to protect the JPEG online.
Right.
Well,
I don't know.
Julie and I have learned a lot about photography from our friend John Ali Machika with First Angel Media, and the watermark is incredibly important for the digital image. And typically when an individual seeks to have that protected image, sans watermark, that would be, more valuable.
100%. What's amazing with technology now that goes against that is people are watermarking their digital files. They're sending them out, and now there are software programs and algorithms to scan that and basically eliminate the watermark.
Oh, yeah?
I mean, I don't think it's perfect,
Right.
but there's always going to be a way to get around shit.
It's an arms race.
There's always going to be there's always going to be a way to get
like
around
with the
stuff.
physical, you probably understand this as a realtor. Like, it's like you said, everything's only worth as much as somebody will pay for it. And so a lot of times with homes and businesses and things like that, and people are trying to sell, so they might
Buy, sell.
Yeah, they might look at a house that maybe was replicated many, many times, like it was built through a blueprint or something like that a company built many, many times, but you're looking at it as like, I lived here for 20 years, I had graduation parties here, I made memories here, I built this in the backyard, I did this or that, but it might not have that value to somebody who's showing up to try to buy it.
Very true. Very true.
I'm always reminded of that when I watch Pawn Stars on the History Channel. So
He's going for him.
Somebody will take something into Rick, and Rick will lowball him, and they'll be like, I know this is worth $10,000. And Rick's like, well, yeah, if you have the exact buyer here that wants this specific thing.
Absolutely.
But I can only give you $6,000 because I've got to store this thing. I've got to protect it until that random person comes along here.
It reminds me of Pennsylvania, if anybody watched Kroll Show. There was Nick Kroll, a comedian.
Oh, yeah.
He had Kroll Show for a while, and a lot of the people that worked on his show were from Pennsylvania. So he came up with this bit called Pennsylvania, and it was basically like Pawn Stars, but one cousin, they were cousins, one lived in Philadelphia, one lived in Pittsburgh. And they like pawned off like Steelers crocheted like Kleenex holders, things like that. It was hilarious because it was like they both had like the ones in Philadelphia had like a Philadelphia accent. Pittsburghese was in the Pittsburgh one. Yeah, exactly.
Great. He was in the league, wasn't he, Nick Kroll?
Was he?
I think.
I didn't
love
watch
that
the league
series.
too
All right.
much, but
All right, sorry to get you off.
No, it's okay. I'm almost done too. So if this is like getting boring, like I'm just about to like wrap all this out. Okay,
No,
all
boring.
right,
This is not boring.
all right.
Not at all.
So last big thing I want to talk about: Federal Reserve 1913. The name itself is intentionally deceptive. So people hear, they're like, "Oh, federal, like it must be a branch of the government." It is not at all. It is once again owned by very powerful banking families, like the Rothschilds coming out of Europe. So once again, even though we defeated British hundreds of years ago, we're back under their control. So here is how money, the second way money is actually created out of thin air. Jerry mentioned the first one when we talked about how banks do fractional reserve. So this is going to seem made up, but this is actually how our country works. The Fed will make more dollars, poof, just out of thin air, because at this point, most of our currency is just electronic. It's just numbers on a screen. Right. They then take that made up money and they distribute it to 12 reserve banks. They charge interest for that made up money, which the reserve banks have to pay the Fed. Then the reserve banks take that and they loan it to local banks who then pay the reserve banks money. So all of this is happening just out of money created out of nothingness. So then the local banks are taking that made up money and they're reloaning it again. So every single step, the interest rates gets higher and higher and higher. Then after they hit what's called the FDIC threshold. So real quick aside, if any of you like start a bank account in a new bank, it always says FDIC insured. You might not know what that means. Basically what that means is you are insured up to $100,000. Right. So if you have $100,000 at your bank, the bank might not be able to get it to you all right then if you want to withdraw at once, but you're at least safe up to that point. So after they meet the 10% threshold, they can take that money and loan it out to multiple people, and that's where the fractional reserve comes in. So here's how money gets made. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, well, wait a minute, that's totally messed up. If the supply of money is going way, way, way up, at some point, the demand is going to drop because they're throwing all this made up money out there. Well, that's exactly what's happening. And I pride myself on being able to make federal interest rates interesting to teenagers. So whenever you hear about the Fed and it's just like, this is boring, I'm not listening to it. This is why the Fed dabbles in interest rates. Because there's so much made up money out there, people don't want it. So the only way to fake it is to keep dropping interest rates lower and lower and lower to make it cheaper and cheaper to borrow the money. Okay. But you can only really go down to zero, right? Yeah. Wrong.
You can go negative?
You can go negative. Europe is so messed up, they have actually gone past zero. So in all these countries...
Are they getting paid to borrow money?
Yes. In all these countries, you know how in this country, it's a pittance at this point, but if you have your money in a bank, they will pay you a tiny amount of interest. In Europe, it's the opposite. If you have your money in a bank, you are actually paying the bank every month for the privilege of keeping your money there. So they're doing this for two reasons. Number one, the interest rate is so messed up, they have to go lower than zero. But number two, by charging negative interest rates, less people are going to try to save money. They're going to put their money back out in circulation because if they keep it, they're actually losing money.
Yeah. Yeah. So Swiss bank accounts, generally, you pay for the privilege for the Swiss to hold your money, but you're not making interest on those deposits.
And the other crazy thing, like
correct?
Everybody talks about bullion, like it'd be so awesome to own bullion. People think that you get like these gold bars. You don't.
You make soup out of that stuff, right?
Yeah, it's actually worth more. So bullion, basically, you get a certificate that says at some bank in Switzerland, you own this little bit of gold. Personally, I won't dabble in it because I think if stuff really hits the fan, what's going to stop a bank in Europe being like, hey, we're not honoring that certificate anymore. Sorry about that.
Not to mention, if it hits the fan bad enough, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
Hey, I need ammunition and guns and seeds so that I can grow my own food.
Yeah.
I have this piece of paper you can take to Switzerland even though we can't leave the country or even get away from the area we're in.
That's a good point.
I like where Jerry's going with this, and I'm getting to all that. That's great. So here's how messed up our country is. So I just checked. The national debt is up over 28 trillion. And that's not even the worst part. Even at 28 trillion, we could literally pay off $500 million a day and not even cover the interest. We wouldn't attack the principal. Now, that's just what we know. If you count the unfunded mandates, that would be like Medicare, Medicaid, we are up over $100 trillion of debt. Other countries have not even got close to this until their entire financial system actually collapsed. So there's a debt clock out there. You can check it, and it's staggering. Just in the time that we have been doing this presentation tonight, the U.S. has added hundreds of million dollars of debt. So kind of a postscript here. This is post-World War I. Does anybody want to take a guess what all these German families have in their wagons there.
Rubles.
Really close. These are Deutschmarks. That is their entire life savings that they're taking to the market to try to buy a single loaf of bread. Because after World War I, especially due to all the sanctions put on them, Germany's currency totally craters. And it's partly this situation that leads Adolf Hitler to his rise in power, because the Treaty of Versailles absolutely demolished Germany, and that leads to Hitler's rise. So I always tell my students, there are ways you can protect yourself against what you're seeing today with hyperinflation. So nothing wrong with actually investing in the stock market. I do it. I'm sure a lot of people do it. A lot of people are way more successful than me. But we do want to say, if you do it, you're basically buying in to the same made-up system. And in 2021, it was basically revealed that it was made up, because this is where, I'm sure you guys know about, a bunch of investors on Reddit got together. I love Reddit. And they're like, we are going to start pumping up a couple of fairly worthless stocks, like GameStop, the cryptocurrency, Dogecoin, and then AMC. Like, if you think about it, everybody's streaming today. So AMC movie theaters was worth next to nothing. They're like, we're all going to buy it. We're going to pump up the currency on all of it. Once it gets really high, we're going to sell it all off and be millionaires. And that's exactly what they did. And so when they do this, Wall Street actually shuts down the market for a couple days straight. And I saw this hilarious meme. It was like,
They delisted, right?
They did that with
The
GameStop,
stock
too.
is delisted.
Yeah,
for
that's what
Yes.
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought he said AMC. My bad.
All of them.
they did it with all
Dogecoin.
three, and they've continued to pump a couple times. But great meme. It was like wealthy white billionaires talking to like younger people, like, you just need to invest in the market. So then it shows a meme of this, and then all the wealthy billionaires are like, oh, wait a minute. Because what regular people realize is they started to realize the way the elites are actually making their money, because they're doing the same exact thing. They know in advance which ones they're going to pump way up.
Yep.
They know which ones they have massive shorts on, so they're going to intentionally make them crash.
Every major politician,
Yep.
I mean, whether it's Pelosi, whether it's
Yep.
pick the other side, and any major politician that's been in in a national federal position for a long period of time in Congress has had opportunities to know where to put their money.
Absolutely.
There's been runs on so many things. And in the futures market alone, fortunes have been made. No one talks about that.
Right.
Now, is it
The
true?
Futures Board in Chicago has made so many Washington, D.C. politicians of fortunes.
Is it true that they are immune from insider trading
My
prosecution?
understanding.
I thought didn't they just pass something federally though that
Now
made
they're
politicians not be able to
Good.
actually
Thank
inside
goodness.
trade? I thought that they did.
Yep.
Well, define inside trade, because I don't even think there's even an accurate.
Oh, we're
definition
just
of
friends,
that.
and
There
you
is-
just
there is
happen
for
to tell me that
civilians,
we're
but
dropping
not
a
for
new fucking
politicians.
electric car, and now
Right.
everybody knows.
But it's hard.
because we mentioned it at a dinner party, and it's not insider trading.
Yeah.
Because they all belong in the same world.
That
They
shit
belong in
goes
the
on
same
every
world that we
day.
do. They're from a
Right.
different
I
America.
don't see how they can. It's a little side. I don't see how any politician can vote on anything related to anything of their holdings. But the argument is that these sons of bitches are so, especially the career politicians. They've been there so long. They're holding all kinds of shit.
Sure.
And their wives and their kids and their grandparents and their neighbors. They're all holding all kinds of stuff. They couldn't vote on anything.
Sure.
Because all these sectors they're involved with are how they're conducting business.
And with the lobbyists, it is staggering how quickly they amass fortunes. Like, I think I read when President Obama entered office,
It's insane.
his family's net worth, I think, was like $750,000. I know it wasn't over $2 million. When he leaves office 8 years later, he and Michelle were worth, I think, $44 million.
But Clinton's even more egregious.
Oh, sure. Oh, my
Clinton-
gosh.
Clinton was the governor of Arkansas, and I think the salary in '92 was like $42,000 a year.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So in 8 years, they come out with all that wealth, but we as the public, we never question it, because it just keeps. We just accept that that's the way it is.
Right.
Like, they're paupers going in, some of them.
Right.
But they're hundreds of millions of dollars when it's done. How does that happen?
It's a siphon. job.
Legally,
Right.
ethically, how
Right.
could it possibly happen?
it's a
They
siphon
wrote
job.
books, they give speaking tours. No. How did they do it during office? I know you're going to make the windfall when you leave,
Right.
but how did you accumulate that legally while you were
Right.
sitting in the seat making $180,000 a year on a senator's salary?
And the sad thing is that's a pittance compared to what the banking cabal is doing, because when you infuse an imaginary currency, meaning you're breaking down the value of something that only has value based on, in our experience, or not experience, instance, the value of the dollar in the world economy. Really, the strength of our military is, for the United States, if you want to know what determines the value of our dollar, it is the military contractors and what we are doing in the world, because the United States has been the thug of this banking cabal for years and years. And there was a book that came out that was Confessions of an Economic Hitman, about what we're doing with Banana Republic and Banana Republics down South America and things like that.
Yeah.
Where we go and set up a puppet government and Iran-Contra and stuff, and we're basically like the thug. We're the railroad dick, you know what I mean?
Well, I wasn't going to mention it, but since you brought up Banana Republics, you mentioned the Clintons. When I was on a mission trip in Haiti, it was really upsetting how powerful American political families like the Clintons and Bushes take advantage of these small countries. So like Haiti is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. Mm-hmm. And so our church has a sister parish down there. And I went down for a mission trip. It was really eye-opening. And while I was there, they talked about how the Clintons and Bushes are buying up massive amounts of land there. And quick aside, one of Hillary Clinton's associates actually got caught sex trafficking children out of Haiti. Didn't go to jail, changed her name. A couple years later, she's out scot-free.
Of course.
But when we talked to the priest there, basically what he shared with us is a lot of the ground in Haiti and in Central America where they're buying are actually on top of the largest freshwater aquifers in the Western Hemisphere.
Wow.
So basically, the elites of the world are a couple decades ahead of us. They know eventually...
They always have been.
Always. They know wars aren't going to be fought over oil. It's going to be over freshwater. And so they're buying that land now. The other upsetting thing to me is we talked a lot about Haitian farming. So the rice they grow in Haiti is brown rice, which is very nutritious. When Bill Clinton was president, they wanted to help the Haitian people, and so they started to import white rice. Mm-hmm. And so not only was it less nutritious, but it threw off the supply-demand for rice. They imported much rice that small Haitian farmers couldn't make it anymore. Now, does anybody want to take a wild guess? What U.S. state did all the white rice come from?
Iowa?
State?
Think Bill Clinton.
Arkansas.
It all came from Arkansas. So, it's frustrating me because you're in this country, you see this poverty, you see so many hardworking, beautiful people down there, and it's almost like these really poor countries can't even get started because all the wealthy Western nations are just absolutely preying on them and pimping them out. Absolutely. So, just to wrap this up.
And the Haitian gangs, too. Did you hear?
I didn't hear about the Haitian gangs. We heard about voodoo down there. What do you know about Haitian gangs?
It's brutal, man. Usually the more impoverished the area, the criminal element, the more brutal it is. Because to survive, to subsist on so little, you have to be so fucking violent. And one practice is to take a spoon and to heat it up on a stove and to place it in an individual's mouth.
That's awful.
The more impoverished an area, the more violent, you know what I mean? Just like what they do over in Africa.
Sure.
Like the warlords, what they do. I don't even want to talk about
the
it.
slums of Mexico.
Mm-hmm. Even the United States.
Oh God, the cartel, what they do. Let's not even go there.
Yeah, really.
It's not for public
What's that
consumption.
Dogecoin? Is it?
Dogecoin?
Was that a Doge? Is that Musk's?
Yeah, it's basically a meme currency, but it's a cryptocurrency. And that was one of the ones they basically started to pump way up. So cryptocurrencies, it's like the Wild West. It is regulated, but some of these things are trading for fractions of a cent. Yeah. So people literally buy millions and millions of shares of them.
I wanted to know if you were going to talk about fractals.
Yeah. So even if it gets up to like 2 cents, they're basically millionaires after that. So Dogecoin is one of the examples. So just to wrap up my end, what I recommend to students is actually invest some in things that are actually physical, real. Like I always say, real estate, land, property, houses has the name right in it. Like Eric, do you want to offer any expertise on
I
the
just
real
think
estate?
land. I mean, they're not making any more of it. That's what everybody says, but it's true. I mean, structures come and go.
Elon Musk is
physical
trying.
land, though.
Yeah.
He's trying to conquer new worlds.
Yeah, I mean,
Mars.
he's going to Mars. Mm-hmm. I mean, but realistically, in our lifetime, it's. And I'm not an investment guru, trust me, because I probably wouldn't be sitting here if I was. I'd be in some island somewhere. But I think owning something tangible like land, I would take that against being speculative on some on something that's
What did your Italian grandfather always used to say?
Invest in real estate.
No, invest in things people can't do without.
Oh yeah, for sure. But he used to say the same thing though, is that like they're not like land is like always going to have inherent value.
I don't like the gentleman very much, but I do have a lot of respect because you have to respect his success, and that's Buffett. Berkshire Hathaway. I mean, look how much one share Berkshire Hathaway, and his mantra was through the decades before the web was even a thing. He would invest on things he understood and things that the average person needs. They weren't sexy, they weren't fancy stuff, but all the staple items that a person would consume. His assumption was they're always going to need to consume this stuff. Right. So these are the safest plays because they're entrenched in society. They're part of your daily habit, shaving cream, things like that. And, that was his thing.
He made a lot of money, millions off just Coke. He owned like tons of Coca-Cola.
Yeah, which is the thing he really didn't need, but it was just so ingrained in society.
Right.
We're idiots. They drink sugar water like that, and that's a necessity.
Right.
We turn that into a necessity.
Before we move on, are you going to discuss fractals anymore?
I don't think I was, so why don't you go for it?
Well, I'm
confused.
Curious.
The only fractals I know is the physics fractals, where they take matter and they keep breaking it down.
Well, that's what happens with ascent, because if you have, let's say you have something that there's 3 billion of such and such, and each one of them is definitely not worth a cent. So you have to create a 0.0001.
Right.
It's 0.00193 cents, right? And so that starts going around the economy. So how far down, how many percentages, or I'm sorry, how many decimal places do we go before we're no longer able to keep track, until we're literally using a fucking quantum computer to calculate like pi how many fucking decimals we go down there? And so if something has a perceived value, and if something has a perceived numerical value, and we start fractaling it and we start fracturing it, how long until we literally take this thing that already doesn't exist and fucking fracture it? Because eventually you can't calculate that many decimal places, and all the money's going around, and we have these transactions, and maybe we're dealing with something that's so small, it has so little value, and eventually it's like we fracture our fucking currency. Like if you had seashells,
It's horrifying.
we need to split this seashell up into 4 because we're infusing with cash, and it only has so much value, and it gets to the point where it literally starts to disintegrate.
Isn't that also the plot of Office Space? Don't they?
Yeah.
Don't they make that program that like
Fraction
takes
of a
off
penny.
the fractions of a cent?
Well, it rounds down, but that's like an automatic, like, here's how we're going to deal with that. But when
And the
you're just
stapler man,
doing,
burn it down.
when you're just doing this with your currency and it's already a theoretical currency, how far do you calculate the decimal place? Like, if I had 8 seashells, and when they keep infusing cash, we already talked about how they're not creating any more inherent wealth. How long before I keep breaking the seashell down? Because if I take $800,000 and I say, well, now we have $1,200,000, all I've done is take the inherent value and broken it down into smaller and smaller pieces by infusing more cash. So how long until the seashell or the piece of clay literally starts to disintegrate?
Right. So, perfect segue. Last part here. How can you actually protect yourself? So people watching this, they're like, wow, this money system is really, really messed up. What can I actually have outside of like house, land, physical things that's actually worth value? You can actually invest in precious metals, and there's 4 of them out there. There's a finite amount, so they always have value. So everybody knows about gold. Platinum is also out there. It tends to follow gold, but it's more valuable, or it's more volatile. I'm sorry. There's also palladium. I've got the updated prices. Now, can anybody tell me which one do we not see up there?
Silver.
Yeah, so if people are watching this, they're like, all right, well, I'm into this, but I don't have thousands of dollars laying around. Here's how you get your foot in the door. As of this month, silver is $25 an ounce. And I always tell my students, hey, as a teenager, even if you're working a minimum wage job, here's how you get your foot in the door. Now, you don't need to be fancy. There's a ton of silver out there for free in circulation if you know where to get it. And that is called junk silver. So this is going to bring in the year that I mentioned before. If you think back to when we severed from the silver standard. So there's 2 different types of silver. The fancy collectible kind, the purer silver, is Troy silver. That's 99.9% pure.
Right.
But junk silver is still solid. It's 90%. Now, the reason it's called junk is it's circulated coins. They've been circulated for decades. They're all beat up. So they don't actually have collectible value, but they do have monetary
Weight
value.
value, yeah.
So what you want to look for, everybody, this is the year. If anybody's watching or listening at home, This is the money year right here, literally 1964. Quarters and dimes from 64 and earlier are 90% silver.
Oh my.
And so because of that, these ones, even though you can still use them as a quarter, even though you can still put them in a vending machine,
There's JFK.
a quarter right there he is. A quarter of this right now, I would say, is worth $3 to $4 just based on the amount of silver in
The
it.
government has to know this, right? They're trying to recollect those,
Of course they do. And like, you know how there's the national coin shortage? That's a separate side conspiracy.
Fascinating.
I don't think it's an
Fascinating.
actual coin shortage. What they're trying to do,
collect them.
they're trying to get physical coins out of circulation
Right.
so that they can go totally digital. And when
Got
you
it.
go digital, then you can regulate people more. So can anybody spot where's the actual real quarter in the whole mix there?
It would be
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sticks out like a sore thumb, right? Because that one is 90% silver. Those other ones are garbage.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
How does the fact that silver tarnishes, erodes over time? So, like the weight of it's done by a wake.
okay.
Won't doesn't silver run the risk of, if not stored correctly, can basically corrode and become less valuable over time?
Well, if you think about the reading then, for that coin in the middle, the reading is key. It's still preserved. The actual tarnish would literally only be thousandths of a gram.
Okay.
So it wouldn't actually affect the value of the coin. So if you put a bunch of coins sideways, even without looking at the ear, a silver coin will stick out like a sore thumb there.
Okay.
So just to wrap it up with the ancients, everybody. The ancients had the right idea thousands of years ago when they were making these things out of gold and silver. It had inherent value. There's a reason the ancients came up with this idea. It's still out there. The banks don't want you to know it. The global elites don't want you to know it. But if you know what's actually real money, then you've actually got the power to be able to amass real fortune that won't actually be affected. So that is the money conspiracy. I could go deeper and darker, but that's what we got for tonight.
And
Excellent
now you
presentation.
know.
Thank you, friends.
excellent presentation.
So this kind of does play a little bit as to what James presented. So I want to ask the four of you. It's funny saying the four of you, not three of you, the four of you. We're all watching this war right now, and again, the left and the right and the politics of it all. I'm not really interested in that. What I am interested in, though, is when you see this on television and you watch it unfold, whether you grab just a little bit of it or maybe you grab a bunch of it one day, and I don't know how closely you're all following what's happening in Ukraine, but do you ever step back and question, how much of what we're seeing is real? I mean, obviously the pain and the suffering and all that stuff's real, but I think it's real. But like, how much are we actually being told? How suspect are you of the origin of the war? Maybe there's a predetermined outcome that's already, out there. I mean, how much of what you're seeing beyond the pain and suffering and the blood and all of that, beyond that, is the rest of it actually real? I'm struggling with it. I have a lot of skepticism because of the military-industrial complex. That's part of it. The money component of it is certainly part of it. And I also think that there's some hesitancy that I have that we are so dysfunctional as a society now, kind of social media, I think, generated the past decade or so, that has put a lot of doubt in my mind of almost anything going on in society today, whether it's just in the United States or world related. So I have all this hesitancy that I'm really not getting, an accurate picture of what really is going on.
I'm so glad you said that, because I thought about adding more to the presentation as it relates to today, but I didn't, because I didn't want to go too dark, or if you guys weren't comfortable with the politics of it. But what I personally truly think is going on is they're using the war as a means to intentionally destabilize the planet, including the United States. Because if you look at the actual global think tanks, we're talking like World Economic Forum, Bilderberger conferences, things like that.
The G8, right?
Yeah, the elites of the world envision a one world government by 2030. So not way in the future. It's the point now within the next 10 years. They envision that, and George Soros envisions China at the head of this one world government. So the problem is the United States has been the strongest nation on earth. So if you want China to be at the top, at some point you're going to have to start breaking down the United States.
Right.
So China can only grow so much and so fast. You've also got to dismantle the United States. And one of the things that was really alarming to me when I knew this was going beyond the realm of just a conspiracy is for a couple years the United Nations, right on their website, bless you, and they don't have it on there anymore. They've de-linked from it, but you can find it separately. They had this section on what they called happytalism. It sounds totally dystopian, like capitalism, but it's called happytalism. And you would watch this thing, and it was terrifying. You basically had these smiling people, and they said, by the year 2030, you're not going to own anything, but all your needs are going to be taken care of, and you're going to be happy about it. So when you see the way things are going today, digital currency, people can be controlled that way. If you have these, like the, not to get into the COVID thing, but like if you've got
Pandemic.
Yeah, if you've got that, people can be controlled that way. In China, they already have this social credit score where if you speak out against the government, if you say something inappropriate on social media, your score can drop to the point where you cannot buy food there. You cannot support your family. So to me, everything is about control. Now, how does it relate to the war? If you notice, the economic sanctions that the United States imposed have made things way, way tougher on us than they have on Russia. Mm-hmm. Within the last week or two, Russia's currency has rebounded.
Right.
Their system, I forget, it's not the ruble anymore. What they're using is rebounded. Interestingly, Vladimir Putin, and this is part of the reason that I don't pass any judgment on this war outside, like you said, of feeling bad about the pain and suffering. He is one of the few hard money leaders out there. He has actually threatened to have Russia start their own precious metals backed currency because he doesn't believe in what's going on in the rest of the world. He's one of the few politicians that has actually called out and straight up said there is a new world order that is actually out there. So it's interesting to me, not to pick sides, but it's interesting as soon as this started, how much the media and all the other countries immediately jumped on Russia. When if you look at how the U.S. political system has been using Ukraine, look how many sons of prominent political figures on both sides of the aisle have basically gotten cushy jobs over in Ukraine. There's definitely something going on there. Mm-hmm. But so in this country now, and they say it's because of the embargo, but look how many shortages and scarcities we're seeing. And it's going to get even worse. And really creepy conspiracy. Have you guys seen how many food processing plants over the past month have either caught on fire, been destroyed, or in one case, an airplane hit into one?
In the last 6 months, I think there's up to like 20.
Yeah, and you're right. And over the past 2 months, there's been 12. There's been 12 in just the past 2 months. And so personally, and then I'll stop talking because I feel like I'm talking too much, I feel like the enemy this time is within. To me, not to undermine our grandparents who were alive during World War II, because I'm sure that was scary, but in World War II, you more or less knew who the enemies were. It was the Axis powers.
Right.
Now you don't, because the enemy is within. And I feel like the powers that be have been trying really hard to wreck the United States, but they found that it's frustratingly resilient. It's way more resilient than they expected. So now they're amping it up, and that's why you're actually seeing these food processing plants get destroyed, because they want that shortage, because they want to usher in this dystopian hell that's coming.
There was one where a plane crashed into it?
Yeah, that just happened.
I had heard there, like I said, up to maybe not quite 20, maybe like 17, 18 or something like that, but they like burned to the ground, and there wasn't a lot of reasoning behind that. But
do you mind if I jump in?
Yeah, of course not.
What we have today is a
It's a bunch of fuckery. That's what we have right now.
A subversive war, and it is open war, and it is everywhere. And the world that our children grow up in is not just different. Our children are now interacting with a digital reality that we are unable to see, perceive, or interact with. in the way that an individual that first bonds with a object, which is a tool, which is a machine, which is a supercomputer, which is a fucking robot. And incidentally, we mentioned Gary, our friend with the quantum physics and blah 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 blah. And I was actually, did you get one too, or did he give this one? I was one of the first individuals in the United States of America to own what is now a mobile phone, which is actually a supercomputer.
What?
Yeah, and he's like, I got these. Do you want it? It's a robot. And I'm like, yeah, sure. And it was this little silver case, and you'd press it, and it would flip open on its own. I was like, okay, I like that. That's just cool. I can just check out my robot. And I never did use the goddamn thing, but I used to carry it around with me. And I think I lost the motherfucker. But that's what these things are with the droid. Like, they're not just supercomputers. They're actually robots. Non-physical fucking, almost like a non-physical entity it learns from you.
And
you
it
know?
communicates like bioenergetically, and like it communicates with the other electronics.
I mean, they got us addicted
around.
to the phones, right? They got the humankind addicted to. There's a science behind the way that, based on the size and what's being delivered and how it's being delivered. They got society somewhat addicted to these. It's the perfect tool to start exuding control.
Well, and we talked about like the war against the machines and all this. Where are we with Soylent Green and all this other stuff? Where are we at in the timeline? And really, like, you know, in movies like Terminator and other literature and things of that nature, it has always been led up to this moment at which we will be at war with machines. We see it in popular culture and Transformers and blah 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 and all this stuff. Infinity War and the Tesseract and all this stuff. You know what I mean? We have already reached the postmodern era. It's a post-information age. So we've already crossed that point where we had the war with the machines. Right now, what we have to do, in my humble opinion, is determine how do we retain our humanity now that we have made peace with the machines and merged lives and worlds. How do we retain our humanity in a post-information, post-modernistic world?
Well, look at what Meta's doing now. I mean, just this whole Zuckerberg thing of the meta universe and all this stuff.
Totally plays into what you were saying about you won't have possessions because it's all in this digital world, and you'll just stay in your little apartment. You'll love it.
And one of the... Oh, go ahead, Jill.
I was just going to say, like, the idea of, like, I think what I had always perceived as being, like, a one world order or a one world government, like, it seemed very, like... I think I had intellectualized it in the way that I see like a government now, but I mean, in consideration with, you know, everything we're talking about, and this is something that I remember seeing on like a video a long time ago, is basically like, you don't have to, like, democracy is an idea. You don't have to destroy a government on paper. Like, all you have to do is dismantle the ideas that create it. And like, that has effectively been, I'm not going to say it's done, but like it's been pretty well.
Well, yeah, and not only the Russian operatives, but also through technology. Yeah, subversively, we get invaded all the time. Our elections are interfered with and things of that nature. But I'm going to just totally jump right off the rails and be like, okay, democratic society, we're all about being a free country, free election, free nation, free people, right? So what is the most important thing an individual can do? Is it freeing other individuals from the perceived limitations which keeps us trapped in this smaller world? Or would it be returning individuals who were never meant to be free to that perceived reality, so that those individuals are not out in the world doing things that they need not be doing?
And what's more merciful?
There's nothing merciful about enslaving someone or imprisoning someone to a perceived reality.
I think one of the things that scares me, like, if people are listening, they're like, I don't know, like, this is sounding a little bit too crazy. Like, New World Order, I don't see it. One thing you have to watch for is when politicians in totally different countries all start using the same thing and the same branding. And so a couple buzz terms to look for is Build Back Better, New World Order, Great Reset. And talking about technology, I think like what you guys are getting at is like called basically transhumanism, like essentially like a synthesis with machines. And one of the quietly terrifying terms that's being thrown out there is the Internet of Things. Have you guys heard that term, Internet of Things? So basically everything is linked into the internet. Now, it starts simply enough, like people are really excited to have like an Alexa in their home or a personal assistant, and like they think it's really cool when like, hey, my refrigerator's on the internet, so I can be somewhere else and I can change the temperature. So it starts with just appliances, but like what the goal of the global elites is all of us are hardwired into it. So it starts innocently enough with the phone. The freedom in the phone is, even though they're really addicting, you can turn it off. You can take the battery out. You can walk away from
You
it.
can't take the batteries out of most of them now.
Yeah, that's true too. The end goal, though, is basically this is inside of us. And once it is, you're never off the grid. And it's basically already started. Years ago in Sweden, people thought it was cool, but it terrified me. Basically, office workers would essentially have fobs put underneath their skin. So basically, you don't have to take your keys. You walk up to the door, you put your arm against it. You walk up to the photocopy machine, you put your arm up against it.
Don't we use that in some military facilities now? Like there's some.
They do like retinal scans and stuff, but you mean more
I
than
know.
that?
I mean implants. Like.
They were saying there was in certain.
I mean, I believe it. That's already here.
There was a Digital
I think it is
Angel
too.
project
let me ask
where
you
they
this.
RFID'd
So,
people.
This is a tough conversation to have because it usually immediately exposes political partisanship, and that's how I have to get to my point. But we have to wade through that. The Earth movement, the Green movement. When I was a kid, going back way back to the early 70s, it was the ecology movement. There was the green ecology flags. It was a movement. And then it proceeded into Earth Day and everything else. Now it's really about big money under the guise of getting the public to conform because we want to quote unquote save the planet. Naturally, when you hear about smog, doesn't sound like a good thing. You hear about other things we're doing to the planet, does not look to be a good thing. I get it. I'm on board with that. That makes sense, logical sense. But I do believe when you talked about globalism and countries working together, or not countries, but individuals in countries in positions of power working together, there's too much unification and too much lust for money for the green movement, not just in this country. I mean, throughout. Now, obviously, India and some of these other countries aren't partaking in it. Right. But a lot of your European, your Northern European countries, your North American countries, and and Japan as well, in the Far East to some degree. Mine is kind of China or North Korea. There seems to be a lot of money these countries are funneling into green movements. I look at that as a cult. I just honestly do. I think sometimes it actually screws up the brain so bad that you view everything. Some people view everything through the lens of green, sure. green, the environment, Mother Earth, all that bullshit. It doesn't mean that there's not elements of being smart and sensible about this planet, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that is, to me, something globally that is part of our society now, which 20 years ago really wasn't.
Sure.
Oh, and I'll be honest, I feel like the green movement isn't getting as much attention as it was, like in what's considered to be like more left-leaning liberal circles. It's become much more about being conscious of, socially conscious. And I think it kind of paved the way. We got like electronic cars, and that's important because gasoline is bad and oil companies are bad. But now it's much more about the technology of what the car can do. Mm-hmm. I don't want them things. Those things are fucking awesome. I think you can go like 0 to 90 in like 5 seconds, and then it shows you on the screen. It shows you little cones and stuff like that.
It's designed to be like the most fun toy you'll ever own.
But here's the thing. What is what was it? There's
the mind.
Hold on. Agenda 21, wasn't it?
It sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's where they basically said I think it's Agenda 21, right?
It was so that basically people would
we'll live in shelving units.
Exactly.
Yeah, they passed this. It was
at
one of the UN conventions,
Mm-hmm.
Agenda 21. And if you look in there, it's too long to read, but it's basically like they had a presentation. They were like, see the map of the United States? See all this land here? You're not allowed to go there. Mm-hmm. And see these tiny little, they're called smart centers, that's where you live. And they basically want to put people in just stacks of shelving units, like there's no property.
Right.
Because anything that was considered to be, not sustainable has to go. So what's not sustainable is public roads, private housing, private vehicles and transportation. And there's already a center in Dubai like that where they supposedly have zero waste whatsoever.
Yep.
Which is great until you look at the fact that it would be the elite that have this beautiful fucking world. Because, like, imagine you're the elite. What is the one resource that we cannot create more of? Another world like this one. So we've got this rampant virus of humanity. It's just fucking exploding population control everywhere. They're trying to do it in Africa where they're literally, like,
sterilizing.
I mean, there's so much rape in Africa. Like, women just get raped in the street. There's a device where, like, basically it's got barb hooks on it, and if men try it, like, that thing comes out and you're not going to rape anybody anymore. You know what I mean? Like, you have this population explosion. It's totally out of control. And when we talk about open war and the subversive, like in Pittsburgh in the last 6 weeks, we've had shootings almost every
There was, like, an
single
armed robbery
fucking night.
just like last
People are
night,
just getting
someone was
killed
talking
out of
about it.
nowhere for no reason. It's totally open war, and I look at it like it's population control.
What about the defund the police movement?
Can I just say one quick thing about the green thing before we get that? Not to blow it off, because that's a good question. I really feel like the green movement is put out there with the long-term goal of control. And Jerry, you mentioned electric cars. Electric cars, there's kind of conspiracies at both ends. Does anybody know when the first electric cars came out? It'll blow your mind.
I thought it was in the 70s.
It was in the 1910s. After Henry Ford, love Harrison Ford.
He's been around a long time. I don't know if he's around that long.
After Henry Ford puts out the Model T, they actually put out an electric version of the Model T that worked very well. But the oil industry was so powerful, they basically crushed it, so it didn't come out. Now I think we're seeing a conspiracy at the other end. I think there is a big push for electric cars because that is essentially another way to control the movement of people. And I can give a couple examples of this. When there were the brownouts in California, so the power supply was limited, all the people out there who owned Teslas couldn't go anywhere because once the battery ran out, that was it. The other crazy thing about Teslas, and I love Elon Musk, like I feel like he's one of the guys that's really pushing against this, but he's also the one that has Tesla. But there is an interesting story about some wildfires in California, and so traffic is backed up, and the Tesla owners are sitting there, and like their cars are about to run out of power, then they're in real trouble. So they call in the Tesla, and Tesla remotely charges the car, and so they're sitting there, and they see the power supply of their car go up. Now, can they really beam out energy? Not officially yet. What happens is these electric cars have limiters on them. And so basically what they did there is they just remotely removed the limiter to show how much power the battery actually has. Part of the reason I think the electric movement is really not pro-environment is people never really think where the electricity comes from. So like, not to stereotype, but like a lot of the Tesla owners that I know think they're a pretty big deal and think they're snobby. They're snobby folks. But I want to be like, hey guys, like, do you really think that all this power is coming from like windmills? No, it's coming from the same coal and power plants that everything else is coming from.
Not to mention those lithium.
And I've read
those
that.
mines, they're like open source.
Yeah,
on the planet,
and that's
basically
terrible for the environment. That's why those cars are so expensive. Because like you said, the batteries are so expensive. So I think that it is basically a control movement under the guise of being an environmental.
Well, that was my whole point. Yeah, I think it might have started out to maybe in the 50s and 60s. There was elements. It was co-opted by the ecology movement, but it just turned out to be another. I mean, look, love him or hate him, I don't like Al Gore. A lot of people do. I get it, but when you look at that, it's hard not to look at the whole thing very suspect when you have people that are really into this movement, yet they fly around in private jets. They're consuming their carbon footprint is not discussable.
Right.
It's the elite dictating to the masses, the unwashed masses.
I would never speak out against.
Do
Al
as
Gore
I say,
because he invented the internet.
Don't look at how I. Don't look at how I do.
What you were saying
Rules
about
for
control,
thee, but not for me.
about controlling the Tesla people and stuff. Why don't you give a brief report on the RFID placement in products as well as digital currency?
Are you talking about
the
barcodes?
Not just that, but you gave me a very interesting synopsis on the whole deal.
Oh my gosh, I don't know if I can remember all
That's
that.
good.
That's all right. Just report.
Can you prompt me?
Yeah, RFID chips are very tiny, and they're being placed in products. A lot of times it will be just the dot of the eye, and it might be in your toothpaste.
Oh, it's like a way of like basically like I think like bioenergetically like kind of like tracking everybody, almost like
Removing the anonymity of cache one.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's
Like,
not
you gotta
just
take inventory of products to see where they go. How
I mean, if you think about it, like your
consumed.
phone has a scanner on it. Okay,
Yeah.
so you can basically take a scanned image of any barcode or any RFID chip or any of those like little
RFQ.
those QR
right.
codes.
My bad.
So you can basically just like take a picture of any QR code
Right.
at all. But if every single product that we consume, and it's mostly unconsumables, has those, and it's basically like imprinted onto the thing that you're taking into your body, like there's only so much space between that like energetic consumption and the biological, like, you know.
Yeah, especially when we have now what you were saying, the basis for literal transmutation, which is basically like alchemy.
Yeah.
Like there's like it's very difficult, I think, to like completely like comprehend, but like I mean they've basically already been able to synthesize human DNA anyway. And so then, you know, you've got all these products that have the ability to like basically be read by the thing you have in your pocket all the time, and like you're constantly tracked, monitored. Everything that you consume is like, you know, like there's like a digital upload of
Yep.
every single
it's
thing
like
that
a
you've
digital
ever
model. That's
Yeah.
right, with where people go and what they do, and it plays into the money changing as well.
Yeah.
And really, what we're driving at is like nanotechnology and biotech, which is fucking huge. Because if you could grow me a brand new arm and you could wire it into my fucking body, or you could fix my fucking spine, and I've never been able to walk, what would you pay? What would you pay to see your son walk again?
I'm glad you mentioned nanotechnology. I think one of the big dangers, I think it's decades ahead of where people realize. Have you guys heard about Morgellons disease? Oh, it's terrifying. So, back in the early 2000s, people were getting these brand new symptoms that nobody had heard of. They would get boils on their skin. They would itch like crazy. When they would break open, blue and red threads would come out of them.
Oh God.
And you look up pictures
That's a
online.
movie
It's
script.
pretty graphic.
When was this going on?
This is early 2000s. So what made me very interested is how quickly scientists rebelled against it. They said, no, that's not actually in the skin. Those are just fibers from their clothing that's winding up on their skin, and they're making the mistake of thinking it's in their skin. These people are like, oh my gosh, no, I have terrible itchy pain from this. When I saw that, I thought, that to me looks like nanotechnology gone awry. Something is in there that's making something over and over and over again. So
Not to mention the strings that came up earlier.
I don't think people realize. I think we are way farther along in nanotechnology.
No doubt.
I think there is a potential people could already basically be infected with nanotechnology, and once you are, I hate to say it, it's essentially game over. And if you want to talk really dark, can we go really dark?
Let's do it.
Okay, if you want to talk about Hollywood being predictive of real life, I have never been a big superheroes fan, but the end of Avengers Infinity War absolutely terrifies me, because it was shocking when people watched it, because, Jerry, help me out, who's the villain? Is it Thanos?
Yeah.
Basically wipes out half the life in the universe with a flick of a switch. And so the terrifying thing is, when we get to the point that we have nanotechnology inside us, that's also essentially a kill switch. And you can basically take out any part of the population that you want to. And people are probably thinking, well, oh my gosh, nobody would ever do that. But you have to understand the mindset of the global elites. They consider themselves the custodians of society, the custodians of the earth. And as you guys mentioned, they think that they basically view humans as a virus. There's too many of us.
Cockroaches.
And so,
They said it at the Bilderberger group where we protested years ago.
I can believe that. And they basically don't have an emotional connection to reducing the population, because they think they're doing what's in the best interest of the earth. And if you listen to some of the quotes from these people, they're terrifying. Like, if you guys heard of the Georgia Guidestones?
Yes.
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 Yeah.
We talked about going to
Refresh
see
that.
them.
Yeah.
Refresh
They're like
that.
a brand new 10 Commandments or something like
Yeah,
that.
it's basically like a synthesis of Stonehenge and the Ten Commandments. It's in Georgia, And they're very mysterious. They were built by somebody by the name of R.C. Christian, and they basically have advice for humans of the future. And one of the pieces of advice is keep the world population under 300 million living in harmony with the earth. And people obviously flipped out about this. They've tried to tear the things
Where are
down.
we now?
7 billion.
7.5 billion.
Oh, 7.5. It's
And
out
so,
of control.
oh my gosh. And
It
so the local police refused to let anybody get close to him. Now, speaking of Georgia, Ted Turner has had a quote and basically said a population of under 500 million people would be ideal. And like, people don't really think about it because people don't know how many people are on the earth. But he is basically advocating for the elimination of 7 billion people. That would make the Holocaust look like a tea party.
Right.
The British Royals, everybody loves the British Royals. The British Royals don't love you.
Johnny
They've
Rotten
said-
didn't like the British rules.
They've said similar things. Bill Gates, who, by the way, Bill Gates, now the largest landowner in the entire United
You're such
States.
a humanitarian
which
for
is
creating the
terrifying.
vaccine, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And like
He doesn't want to feed people there, just give them biotechnology.
Right. He has advocated for decreases in population. He has said with vaccines, we can decrease population by 10%, which is messed up because vaccines should save people.
Right. Where's this at over in Africa, right?
Well, he had actually...
Impoverished areas.
He's
right.
actually been banned from certain countries
Yeah.
like India
Yeah.
because his treatments there have cost the lives of so many people. So the
Mostly
terrifying
women.
thing, it's very dark, but if you look at the global elites of the world...
He's not a doctor.
I know, right? The consistent theme
not even a
is
scientist.
there are too many of us. We need less people.
Well, and the one thing I wanted to mention was I don't know if you ever saw The Astronaut's Wife with Johnny Depp. Oh man, is it a great flick?
I need to see
He
it.
goes
I've never
nuts
seen
or
it.
something. He comes
No,
back.
astronaut goes to space, and basically the premise is gets hit with this transmission, and they're explaining. I don't want to. Man, I'm gonna have to give it away. I'm sorry. Basically, they're explaining to his wife, like, dude, your husband's gone. Like, imagine a videotape that got fucking erased. The videotape's still sitting there. He's still there. What was on that tape is gone. That is not your husband anymore. And so, if you look at like the biorhythms and the fact that it's just electrical information, if it is possible to identify someone's energy signature, which it is, and then intercept that transmission, just the same way there was like a bump thing that was in that Stephen King thing where you intercept additional information when someone's unlocking their vehicle and steal it. So you basically interrupt
Right.
someone's digital,
Right.
well, not digital, but energy signature, and then replace it in a moment. And if that individual is not fully self-aware, how would you know if you were you? I was just me 2 seconds ago, and all of a sudden I'm on a similar train of thought, and now, all of a sudden, if there's another energy signature that has maybe interfered or interacted or been transmitted, how long would it take for me to figure out that I'm not me? In theory.
More Galen's, what's it called?
Morgellons disease.
Morgellons worms.
The threads.
That sounds horrifying.
Yeah.
Checking it out. It's
Where
terrifying.
this-
I just wanted to know
Crawling
why they
under
decided
their
to take the police
skin.
department away. I mean,
What's that?
I just
Reminds me
wanted to
of
know
that thing I drew.
why we thought it was a good idea to defund the police. I mean,
Well-
I don't get it.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah,
And I think
mean-
I can do it without even getting political. I think that the end goal, let's say for example, the global elites really do want a new world order. The first thing they have to do is break people down so that they no longer have a self-identity, they no longer have pride in who they are. So what we've seen through the media over the last 10 to 20 years is a constant barrage of making people want to fight each other over teeny tiny differences rather than just coming together as humans.
Certainly.
And what I look at, if you look in biblical times, and this is kind of alarming to me, the parallels, when one country would overtake another city, the very first thing they would do is they would remove half of the people in the city and replace them with foreign people. And not only was that a huge blow in the pride of the city, but then when you do that, basically, even if you can overthrow the people who just conquered you, after a generation, who do you even kick out?
Right.
Because then everybody's a mix of
Intertwined.
everybody.
Break the
yeah.
culture.
So I feel like when you look at all the attacks today, like there are no men or no women anymore. Like, there is nothing about being like having pride in being an American. What you're seeing to me is an intentional homogenization of everything.
Just like the way they break down white bread, and it totally just looks like a.
Yeah.
Well, and then you just to bring it back to the original topic, I have heard that was one of the big issues in Ukraine, is because where things were really starting to break out, like there was tons of Russians in Ukraine, and you know what I mean, tons of Ukrainians in Russia, and that like it was like right on a place where it was difficult to say like who was who and who would like who the real enemy is.
Donbass region.
And I don't remember exactly. I have a coworker who has family over there that is like, and you know, you wonder if you wonder if any of it's actually real or not. Like her family has literally not been safe this entire time, and like they've.
I believe the war is very much real. Yeah. I've lost a
but I do feel like
war.
that is a big part of like where some of like the conflict has arisen there. Is just because there is like kind of like it's difficult to say, you know, who the enemy is.
I think
could it be though just Putin's a madman?
I mean,
could it
possibly,
be that too?
But
like he's just out of his mind.
He's in a no-win situation. If he backs down now, he's a bitch, and the mafia over there will probably kill him. But in addition to like a great point with the divide and conquer strategy and just breaking us all down, like when you break white bread down so far, you break the grains down. Like the family is the building block of society. It always has been. When you break that basic block down, then you can just kind of mold it. You can turn it back into the clay, you know. And I think with that whole defund the police, what did we have after that point? We had a black team, we had a blue team, we had this team, we had that team. We have all these different teams, and it comes back to the subversive war, because once we partner up and we make unofficial coalitions and we have they're fucking false flags. I mean, you got that blue stripe, like you see all these workout shirts and these hunting shirts, and they're all versions of the United States flag, and it says right in our Constitution. Number one, you don't wear that fucking thing. Number two, you don't fucking alter that thing. Like we talk about false flag operations, and meanwhile, false flags are being flown in people's fucking yards, and it's just by definition that's a false flag.
Definition of patriotism itself is a false flag.
Definition of patriotism.
The definition of patriotism itself can be viewed as a false flag.
Can I give one and only one potential positive of a new world order?
Yeah.
Because there is one that I can think of. So
they're not going to let Nickelback in? I mean, it would be positive.
Nickelback's so terrible.
I mean,
is Nickelback respected in the music industry, Eric? Like,
I think maybe the first couple years they came.
They're coming back around. People are respecting them more.
I respect their money that they earned. I mean,
their
popular.
first album, was it the first one?
No, they're finally earning their way back.
They had
people
a really good album.
People are starting to respect them again.
There was a really good album they did. That was like the first one that they ever came out with.
I want to go back to what I was saying before about the Illuminati.
I'm good with that.
Is Nickelback involved in Illuminati now?
I don't want to talk about Nickelback.
They have to be to put that shit on us.
There was something that happened, and I don't remember where this was told to me by someone in a secret society, and it was basically there was like a note that was passed that mentioned the Illuminati, and it was pinning who was supposed to be the Illuminati on a group or a coalition that wasn't actually the Illuminati, and the other like illuminated ones were kind of hiding in plain sight, because it just means like individuals who see the world for what it is rather than being in a perceived reality. And I write a lot of crazy, weird stuff. I did a lot of illicit substances and lived kind of a crazy life. And I have like a collection of sort of like poetic keys, and one of them is reality is the perception itself is the illusion. And if there are illuminated ones out there and they are able to see the world for what it is and see beyond the illusion, I think it's getting to the point where the world changes too fast to keep up with. So what do we do?
I've considered that a lot, actually. I've definitely discussed the fact that, you know, in one moment your enemies can always change, and your alliances change all the time. And I think that's part of what we're seeing, you know, in some of the global situations that are happening. But that, I think that reality reflects further and further out. Like it's like it can happen in a moment between just two people, or it can happen in, a fraction of a moment between a million people.
And the one thing I like is that it's been said, civilization's skin deep. You know what I mean? We're not getting along. Everything's cool. Then we realize we're friends and everything's good. There's a reason why they don't have fucking scissors at the fucking grocery store checkout. I'm dead serious. You will never see sharp items. And it was literally like these people got into it in a grocery thing. She grabbed the scissors. She was like, you pissed me off bad enough. It's like road rage. You know what I mean? You pissed me off bad enough. There's a weapon right here. Like, civilization is skin deep. And I feel like in those survival moments, when our lives are threatened and we find ourselves in actual physical danger, that is when we know ourselves. And that is when we know who our true friends are, because they're the people we think about before we think we're going to die. The people we'll never see again, who we just want to see one last time.
Good. I know you were going to say something, weren't you?
Oh, well, just to try to end
that's pretty deep.
Just try to end it on a positive note, and maybe to tie it back into like UFOs and aliens, which we normally talk about.
Yes.
So, like, the one theme I've consistently seen in literature is for the planet Earth, for our civilization to be basically brought up into concert with this galactic unity, this like League of Galactic Nations that are out there. The consistent thing I see is the notion of countries can't actually exist. It's apparently in the cosmos an antiquated idea. And so for the Earth to basically be welcomed in to this galactic group, it basically just has to be a one world planet. So everything that we're seeing is pretty terrifying, but I hold out a glimmer of hope that maybe it's being done because the elites of the world know that this is out there. They know that we're right on the doorstep, but to actually be like welcomed into that higher level, we basically just have to have a one world planet. That is the only positive I can actually think of the potential new world order.
Well,
I hope it's true.
If we do get to that point, rather than borders, and I don't know if we could do without borders, but we're already opening the fucking borders. Like, we have a revolving door. Like, we're not policing borders. So, like, in legalities and law and monetary currency, in my humble opinion, borders are important, just like governments are important. However, harking back to the spiritualism, which is kind of where my heart lies, it talks about the 12 tribes and the different peoples. And that's over in the Middle East. That's what, in my opinion, is so difficult and challenging for westernized analysts to understand, is that it is not about nations. It is about tribes. It is about families. It is about blood. It is about respect. And that's what some elements that operate on the street understand, is that it's about respect and it's about love. Even if you hate your enemy, you love your enemy because your enemy fights well and your enemy teaches you. It's when there's perceived disrespect that somebody's got to go. But as far as the wars, I mean, unfortunately, racially, the world don't fucking get along. And that is unfortunate. But when we're able to reach across those divides that separate us, and the years of oppression and the generational curses and the perceived wrongdoings and all the ugly history of the world, when we're able to reach across, especially with an individual that maybe we're beefing to begin with, and then we find a moment that we can stand together. I don't know. Those are moments where humanity finds itself.
That's a good way to end it.
I like it.
Thank you, James. You did it again, man. You did it again, James.
Thanks, friends. I was worried about this one since we weren't talking about UFOs.
This was awesome.
This was
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah,
This
this
is
was
awesome. Seriously, thank all of you. To show 250, 5 people.
That's awesome.
Right?
Congrats
5
to
people.
you,
We
too.
did it.
Yeah.
250? Wow.
250.
Hard to believe.
That's awesome.
That was a challenging episode.
New space.
New space.
Yeah, new space.
New space. Many more to come.
That was a challenging episode.
All right. Friends, we are